Welcome back to my YouTube channel, where we explore thrilling sci-fi stories and pull out the real-life lessons hidden inside them. In today's episode, we follow Rafe Dreen, a broke salvager who boards a ghost ship for a payday, only to be captured by Princess Sarinth and forced into a deadly duel that reveals a mysterious star-born mark on his chest, sparking a galaxy-wide firestorm of prophecy, power, and politics. The key takeaway is that desperation can push us toward risky choices, but integrity is what determines who we become when consequences hit. True strength isn't just winning fights, it's choosing compassion and responsibility when fear and hatred try to control the narrative. And sometimes the biggest change in the universe begins with one person refusing to treat others like lesser, choosing truth over pride, and courage over cruelty. Imagine being so broke you're thinking about selling the lining of your boots for food. That was me. My name is Rafe Dreen, and my job is chasing ghosts across the galaxy. It's a fancy way of saying I'm a salvager, a guy who knows his way around a plasma torch and can talk his way out of trouble. But right now, talk wasn't paying the bills. My ship, the Rusty Mule, looked like it had picked a fight with an asteroid field and lost. We were hiding on the dark side of a dead moon named Kithra, because orbiting this useless rock was a prize. A massive ghost ship, the Cerulean. If I could crack this thing open, my problems would be over. And trust me, you'll want to see how this plays out. With my magnetic boots locked onto the mule's hull, I stared at the ghost ship. It was a Zeraleon cruiser, a stunning design of sharp, crystal-like angles and graceful flowing struts, now peppered with tiny meteor scars and coated in a thin layer of space frost. It was completely dead. No lights, no warmth, no sign of life. Just a giant floating safe, waiting for someone with the guts to open it. "All right, Mira," I whispered into my helmet's comm, talking to my ship's slightly less than legal AI. "Run the scan again. You positive this thing's empty?" "Scans confirmed, Captain," Mira's synthesized voice chirped in my ear. "No active energy signatures. No life signs." "It is, as you humans say, a tomb," she added, "though I don't get the appeal of robbing tombs. Statistically, it invites curses." "We're not robbing a tomb, Mira. We're recycling for profit," I corrected her. I fired up the plasma torch on my wrist. The blue flame was invisible in the vacuum, but I could feel its hum. "I'm going for the engineering core. The phase conductors on a Cerulean sell for a fortune on the outlaw stations. Get me in and out, and we can finally afford that engine upgrade, and maybe some real food." I wasn't a bad guy, just a guy with bad luck. And in this universe, when you're desperate, you either get a big payday or a plasma bolt to the chest. I was really hoping for the payday. I cut a perfect circle around a small service hatch, the metal peeling away like warm butter. I pulled the metal plate free, clipped it to a tether, and slipped inside. The ship was cold, a deep, bone-chilling cold that my suit's heaters were barely fighting off. The lamp on my helmet cut a sharp beam through the darkness, illuminating dust motes and tiny ice crystals hanging perfectly still in the zero gravity. I clamped my boots to the floor, and the loud thunk echoed in the terrifying silence. For an old ship, this place was clean. A little too clean. I made my way through the strange, sloping hallways, my light gliding over surfaces that looked more like polished black stone than metal. Then I found it. Engineering. It was enormous, like a cathedral built to worship technology, and right in the middle, the primary core, gleaming like it had been polished just yesterday. "Mira, I'm looking right at it." "It's in perfect condition," I whispered, floating towards it. "This makes no sense. Why would anyone just abandon a ship this pristine?" "Hull analysis suggests it was decommissioned, not destroyed, Captain," Mira offered. "Perhaps it's a memorial." "Well, the dead don't need phase conductors," I muttered, pulling out my toolkit. I was so focused on the conductor array's complex locking system, so lost in the delicate work, that I never heard the footsteps, because there weren't any. There was just a soft click, and the entire universe exploded in light. Every panel, every console, every light strip in the gigantic room flashed on, bathing me in a harsh, sterile, blue-white light. I froze, my hand still on the core. I was completely blinded. "That does not belong to you, human," a voice said, as sharp and cold as space itself. As my vision returned, I spun around, my boots scraping against the deck. I was surrounded. There were 8 of them, tall, slender figures in shimmering silver armor that looked way too beautiful to be functional. They were all holding long, silver-blue energy pikes, and every single one was pointed right at my chest. The Zerelion Royal Guard. I was in a universe of trouble. A new figure stepped through the guards. She wasn't as tall as the others, but the way they parted for her made her seem 10 feet tall. She wore no helmet. Her skin had a soft, iridescent sheen, like mother of pearl, and her features were sharp, aristocratic, and painfully beautiful. Her hair was the color of a midnight sky, pulled back in a severe, complex braid. Her eyes, which tilted up just a bit at the corners, were the color of polished obsidian, and they were staring at me with a look of pure boredom mixed with absolute rage. She was wearing a deep crimson uniform that screamed high rank. This was Princess Sarinth, third heir to the Zerelion throne, a woman famous across 3 systems for 2 things: her volcanic temper and the fact that she'd never, ever lost a duel. Of course, I didn't know any of that yet. I just saw a pretty lady with a lot of angry-looking friends. So I did what I always do. I gave her my best, charming, "I'm just a poor scavenger" smile. "Well, hello there," I said, raising my hand slowly. I think I must have taken a wrong turn. "I was just, admiring the architecture," I continued. "Huge fan of the whole pointy aesthetic. I'll just be on my way now." Princess Sarinth did not smile. She took a step closer, her eyes moving from my face down to the open panel on the core. "You are trespassing on an imperial sanctum, human," she said. And the way she said human made it sound like something she'd just scraped off the bottom of her boot. "This vessel is the Star of Zerel, the first flagship of my great-grandmother. It is a memorial, and you are recycling it." "Look, Princess," I said, finally noticing the royal crest on her uniform and realizing exactly how deep I was in it. "Honest mistake. I'll put everything back. No harm, no foul." "Silence." Her voice sliced through the air. "You have defiled this place with your greed. My guards could execute you right here. A simple plasma discharge. It would be tidy." My smile finally disappeared. "That seems a little extreme, don't you think?" Sarinth tilted her head, and for a split second I saw a flicker of something. Was it amusement? "It does, doesn't it?" she said. "My flagship is 2 sectors away. I was on a ceremonial pilgrimage when your rust bucket of a ship tripped our silent alarm. Now, I am annoyed, and I'm behind schedule." She looked me up and down like a predator inspecting a very disappointing meal. "Take him." The world spun. The butt of an energy pike slammed into the back of my helmet. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was her turning away, already looking bored. I woke up on a different ship. This place wasn't cold and dead, like the Star of Zerel. This place was alive. The air was warm, perfectly filtered, and smelled faintly of ozone and some kind of flower. I was inside a cage made of pulsing blue energy, right in the middle of a room so massive it could have held my entire ship. It looked like a throne room or a courtroom, maybe just a viewing lounge for gods. One entire wall was a window looking out into the galaxy. Stars drifted by, and nebulas painted the darkness with strokes of purple and red. And in the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat Princess Sarinth, perched on a throne-like crystal chair. She had one leg crossed over the other and was tapping a long, elegant finger on the armrest. Her crew, all in crisp uniforms, stood along the walls, just watching me. "The human is awake," Sarinth announced, her voice echoing in the huge space. "Rafe Dreen, salvager, thief, wanted in 2 systems for credit fraud and unauthorized recycling. She'd clearly done her homework. A charming, broke, and utterly insignificant man. "Hey now," I said, rubbing the back of my head. "I'm not insignificant. I'm just specialized." Her lips twitched into a tiny, humorless smile. "Your crimes are severe, human. Trespass, theft of imperial property, and worst of all, desecrating a sanctified vessel. The penalty for this is, quite simply, death." My stomach did a nosedive. "Whoa, hold on. Let's talk about this. I can pay you back. I mean, not right now, but I can work it off." "We do not need your work," she said, standing and gliding down the steps from her throne. She began to circle my cage like a shark. "The law is clear. It is my duty to execute you." "Your duty seems to involve a lot of executing people," I muttered under my breath. "However," she continued, ignoring me, "Zeralian law is also very traditional. We value honor, even when dealing with lesser species." Ouch. "So I will offer you the two traditional paths." She stopped right in front of me, so close I could see tiny flecks of silver in her dark eyes. "Option 1. Execution. A plasma bolt right here, right now. Quick, tidy, and as I said, boring." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Or Option 2. The Kashel. The right of judgment. An ancient honor. You fight me in a duel to the death." I just stared at her, speechless. "If you win," she said with a tiny dismissive shrug, "you walk free. Your ship, your tools, your life, all returned. If you lose, you die, but you die with honor." She said it like she knew the concept of honor was completely wasted on me. I looked at the heavily armed guards. I looked at the princess. Sure, she was slender, almost delicate looking. But me? I was a brawler. I'd survived fights in filthy cargo bays and zero-gravity bars on shady asteroids. I'd outrun enforcers and wrestled mutants. This princess! She probably got her nails done twice a day. My head was still throbbing, but I knew a sucker's bet when I saw one. And this wasn't it. This was my only ticket out of here. I pulled myself up straight, gathering every last shred of confidence I had left. "A duel," I said, letting a slow, cocky grin spread across my face. A little dance with the princess? Now how could a guy like me possibly refuse? I even gave her a wink. A collective gasp went through the crew behind her. I saw two of the guards actually flinch, like I had just committed the ultimate insult. Princess Zarinth's eyes didn't even blink, but that tiny hint of amusement was completely gone, replaced by a coldness that chilled me more than the ghost ship ever had. "You have no idea what you're asking for, human," she whispered, her voice like silk and steel. "Oh, I think I do," Rafe shot back, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "I choose the duel." Zarinth just stared at him for a long, silent beat. Then, a smile spread across her face, a terrifyingly beautiful, razor-thin smile. "So be it," she said, turning to her guards. "Prepare the dueling ring. The human has chosen his own end." The main hangar bay of the flagship was a massive chamber. Hundreds of crew members had gathered on the catwalks above, their pale Zeralian faces watching in utter silence. It felt less like a duel and more like a public execution. On one side of the hangar, the giant bay doors were wide open, but a shimmering, transparent energy shield was the only thing holding in the ship's atmosphere. Beyond that shield, the dead moon Kithra hung in the blackness, flanked by its two smaller, glowing sister moons, which bathed the ring in a sickly, otherworldly light. Rafe stood in the center, having been stripped of his jacket and gear. He was left with just his cargo pants and a cheap synthetic shirt. A guard handed him the weapon. It was a plasma blade, a Tesla, the guard called it. It had a long, weighted hilt, and when he pressed the activator, a 3-foot blade of crackling violet plasma shot out. The hum was low, and a wave of heat washed over his face. The blade felt heavy, unbalanced in his hand. Then Zarinth entered. She had changed. Now she wore a form-fitting black dueling suit that left her arms bare, her hair tied back severely. She carried her own blade and moved with a grace that was fluid and predatory. This was no princess playing dress-up. This was a panther entering a cage. A very, very bad feeling began to creep up Rafe's spine. Saranth activated her blade. The snap hiss it made was sharper than his, its color a piercing royal blue. She didn't look at him. Instead, she addressed the silent crowd. This human scavenger has insulted the imperial throne. He has defiled the memory of Empress Tethys. By the ancient blood of Jeriel, he has chosen the Kashal, trial by combat. I accept his plea for judgment. The crowd roared, a formal, chilling sound that echoed through the bay. She finally turned to Rafe, sinking into a low, perfect fighting stance. "Ready your blade, thief!" Rafe swallowed hard. All his earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by a cold knot of dread in his stomach. He gripped the hilt and raised the blade. "Here goes nothing," he muttered. Sarinth didn't wait. She moved. She wasn't just fast. She was instantaneous. She crossed the 10 yards between them in a blur. Rafe barely managed to get his blade up in time. The clang of plasma hitting plasma sent a shockwave up his arm that rattled his teeth. The sound was deafening. He stumbled back as his street brawler instincts took over. He swung wide, a heavy, desperate arc aimed right at her head. Sarinth didn't even bother to block. She just ducked under it, the movement so fluid he didn't even feel the air stir. As she came back up, her blue blade flicked out, tracing a line of fire across his ribs. Rafe yelled, jumping back. The plasma had seared right through his shirt and kissed his skin. It burned like hell. The crowd roared again. "You fight like a drunken grow," Saranth said, her voice perfectly calm, not even a hint of heavy breathing. She circled him. "All brute force, no control." "Shut up," Rafe grunted, lunging at her. He was a scrapper, not a swordsman. He needed to get in close, use his weight to his advantage. He rushed her, swinging his blade like a baseball bat. But she was just toying with him. She parried every single blow. Clang, snap, hiss, clang. Her movements were tiny, precise. She was a fencer. He was a club fighter. She would let him overextend himself. Then she would nick him. A cut on the arm here, a burn on the shoulder there. He was sweating buckets, panting for breath, his shirt already dark with sweat and dotted with fresh scorch marks. He was tough and he was strong, but he was completely, hopelessly outmatched. The horrifying realization dawned on him. She wasn't even trying to kill him. She was dissecting him, piece by piece, humiliating him in front of her entire crew. Anger, hot and blinding, surged through him. He wasn't going to die like this, not as some kind of sport. "That's enough!" he roared. He poured everything he had into one last, desperate attack. He feinted left, then brought the heavy plasma blade down in a powerful two-handed vertical strike meant to shatter her guard and end this fight for good. He was far too slow. Sarinth saw it coming a mile away. She didn't sidestep. She didn't block. She moved inside his guard, a shockingly dangerous move. Her left hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, deflecting his blow just enough. At the exact same moment, her own blue blade slashed down. It wasn't a killing blow to the heart. It was a disabling, contemptuous strike right down the center of his chest. The plasma blade sizzled. Rafe stumbled back, bracing for the searing, unimaginable pain of a plasma blade carving his torso in half. He let go of his weapon, clutching his chest. But the pain never came. There was nothing, just an intense, radiating heat. He looked down. His cheap synth shirt, caught by the blade, had been slashed open from his collarbone to his navel. The two halves of the shirt fell open. And Rafe just stopped. He was breathing hard, his body braced for an agony that never arrived. He looked down at his own chest and just stared. There was a mark, something he'd had his entire life. a swirling, complex pattern of scar-like tissue that he'd always assumed was a birthmark, or maybe a chemical burn from his time at the orphanage on Cygnus 3. He'd never paid it much mind, but it wasn't a scar, not anymore. Where Sarenth's blade had passed, the mark was glowing. A deep, pulsating cosmic blue, like a nebula trapped right under his skin. The intricate spirals and symbols burned with an internal light, pulsing in time with his frantic heartbeat. It was alive, and it had stopped the plasma blade cold. He wasn't even burned. The hangar bay fell completely silent. The roar of the crowd, the hum of the ship's engines, everything just died. Princess Sarenth was frozen. She was poised for a follow-up strike, her blade held high, but her arm was visibly shaking. Her eyes weren't on his face anymore. They were locked on his chest. Her perfect, arrogant mask of control was gone, completely shattered. Her face was bloodless. Her lips were parted. She looked terrified. She slowly lowered her blade, the blue plasma hissing and sputtering as her grip wavered. "That symbol," she whispered. Her voice was a choked, strangled sound, not meant for the crowd, but just for him. It can't be." She took one hesitant step back. The duel, the thief, the ship, it was all forgotten. There was only the glowing thing on his chest. She switched to the galactic standard language, her voice cracking. "You... human. Where did you get that?" Rafe was on one knee, breathing like a busted engine. He was just as lost as she was. He touched the mark. It was warm, humming with a strange power. "What, this?" he panted, looking from his chest to her terrified face. "It's just a mark. I've had it since I was a kid. From the orphanage. I don't know why. What is it?" The silence from the catwalks broke. A murmur rippled through the crew, not of excitement, but of fear, of awe. Whispers in the Zarelian tongue filled the air. "The Vokshaw. The Starborn. Impossible." Sarenth deactivated her blade. The snap hiss died, leaving a silence that was louder than any noise before it. She raised a trembling hand. "Halt!" she commanded, her voice shaking but slowly regaining its authority. "The duel is halted." She pointed at Rafe. "Guards, seize him. Take him to the observation lounge. Do not harm him. Seal this hangar. No one leaves. No one sends a signal." The guards rushed forward, but their movements were hesitant. They grabbed Rafe's arms, but their grips, which had been brutal before, were now strangely gentle. It was like they were handling an unexploded bomb. As they dragged him out, Rafe locked eyes with Sarenth. She was just standing there in the middle of the ring, staring at the spot where he had knelt, her entire world visibly tilting off its axis. The memory hit Sarenth like a physical blow as she stared out the viewport of the observation lounge. Rafe was in the containment field again, just sitting on the floor, staring at his own chest, where the mark had now faded back into a dull, intricate scar. She was a child, only 10 years old, in the Imperial Library on Zarel. It was a vast, ancient place filled with dust and starlight. Her grandmother, the old empress, was with her. Her grandmother, a woman who had ruled for 2 centuries, was not a kind woman. She was a practical one. She had unrolled a physical scroll, a brittle, priceless artifact. In an age of data screens, a real scroll was a holy thing. "You will hear whispers, child," her grandmother's voice, dry as autumn leaves, had said. "Poisonous myths, legends of the Starborn." Her long, elegant finger had pointed to a faded illustration on the parchment. It showed a warrior figure wreathed in starfire, and on the warrior's chest was a glowing spiral sigil, the exact symbol currently sitting on the human scavenger's chest. "A prophecy," her grandmother had spat. "It says a warrior will come, a Vokshaw, who can awaken the dormant fleets of the lost kings, a warrior who can unite the old blood, or destroy us." "Is it real?" young Sarinth had asked. It's a lie, the Empress had snapped. A fairy tale to frighten thrones. But there's a part they always forget to tell. The part we have suppressed for 1,000 years. The prophecy says the star-born will be human. She had tapped the scroll. It is our family's sacred duty to deny this myth, to crush it, to ensure it never, ever takes root. Her grandmother's eyes had gone as cold as the void. If it ever does prove real, Sarinth, we will be the ones to find it, and we will cut it out of the galaxy's heart before it can beat. Sarinth shuddered, the memory fading. She turned from the window as a giant hologram flickered to life. The face of her mother, the current Empress, filled the room. Her face was a mask of cold fury. Sarinth, report. And what is this communications disturbance? Mother, we had an intruder, a human. We dueled. And then Sarinth hesitated. I don't give a damn about your little sword fights. I'm getting alerts about a symbol. Talk. He has the mark, Mother, Sarinth said, her voice barely a whisper. The Voshaw. I saw it, my blade hit it, and it lit up. For a long moment the Empress was silent. It's a fake, a human deception. It stopped a plasma blade cold, Sarinth insisted. Detain him, the Empress commanded, her voice devoid of emotion. Take him to the diplomatic interrogation wing. I want to know who he works for, who crafted the forgery, and then I want you to get rid of the problem. Is that understood? Yes, Empress, Sarinth replied. But as her mother's image started to fade, Sarinth's chief communications officer burst onto the bridge, his face as white as a ghost. Your Highness, you need to see this. He didn't bother waiting for permission. With a tap on his datapad, the main view screen flipped from the star-dusted void to the interstellar newsfeed. It was everywhere, splashed across the outlaw networks, the corporate channels, and even, impossibly, the encrypted Imperial military frequencies. Someone in the hangar bay had been recording the whole thing. The galaxy watched the duel. They saw Rafe's last-ditch lunge. They saw Sarinth's final strike. They saw his shirt tear open. And they saw the glow. The camera zoomed in, capturing the symbol in perfect, crisp, high definition. Then it cut to Sarinth's frozen, horrified face. The clip was only 30 seconds long, and it was playing on an endless loop. It was spreading like a plague. The title, in bold galactic standard, read, The Starborn is Human. The Zarellian prophecy is real. Sarinth felt the blood rush from her head. Get that taken down. Shut it all down now. We can't, Highness, the officer stammered. It's replicating too quickly. It's already cached on every server from here to the Outer Rim. The galaxy had just been set on fire. Within moments, Sarinth's console erupted with the notifications, a blinding supernova of alerts. Political alliances were shattering. Rebel cells, long crushed under the Empire's heel, were praising the arrival of a human savior. Imperial loyalists and rival noble houses were screaming for the human's immediate and public execution for heresy. Her snake of an older sister, Princess Aya, sent a private comm, her words coated in fake sympathy. Oh, Sarinth, what a terrible mess you've gotten yourself into. Mother is absolutely livid! Then a new encrypted directive sliced through the noise. It was from the Empress herself. It contained just 3 words. Eliminate him quietly. Sarinth just stared at the message. Eliminate him. Get rid of the problem. Chalk it up to a dueling accident. She glanced over at Rafe. He wasn't some messiah. He wasn't a heretic. He was just a charming, broke, and utterly baffled scavenger who had tripped and fallen into the one secret that could rip her empire to shreds. He was looking right at her, all his earlier swagger gone, his eyes wide with pure, simple confusion. What is going on? He asked. What is that thing on my chest? She looked at him, and in that instant, Princess Sarinth made a decision. She wasn't sure if she made it as a princess, a warrior, or just as a woman who was sick and tired of old, poisonous lies. She strode to the console and killed the containment field. The blue energy walls flickered and died, and Rafe scrambled to his feet. What are you doing?" "Get up," Sarinth snapped, her voice sharp and urgent. She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward her. "My mother wants you dead. Half the galaxy wants you dead. The other half is ready to build a religion around you. Right now, I'm the only one who just wants some answers." She shoved him toward a private elevator. "Where are we going?" he asked, stumbling to keep his balance. "To my personal hangar," she said, pulling the hilt of her plasma blade from her belt. "My guards are going to try and stop us. That brawling skill you have? You're about to need it. We are leaving this ship." The elevator doors slid open into a smaller private hangar. Her personal ship, a sleek black void cutter, sat ready. Two of her personal guards, the same ones from the derelict ship, snapped to attention. "Your Highness," the captain began, "the Empress's orders are to secure the human." "My orders," Sarinth said, igniting her blade in a flash of blue light, "are to get to that fighter." She didn't hesitate. She moved like lightning, striking the captain with the flat of her blade and sending him sprawling. The other guard leveled his pike. Rafe, finally catching on, slammed his fist into the guard's helmet, a sloppy, powerful punch that sent the man reeling. They bolted up the ramp and into the fighter's cockpit. Sarinth dropped into the pilot's seat, her fingers a blur across the controls. "Princess Sarinth, this is treason!" the guard captain shouted over the comms as he struggled to his feet. "Stand down, by order of the Empress!" The engines shrieked to life. The hangar's massive outer doors began to groan open. "Treason," Sarinth muttered to herself, gripping the flight stick so hard her knuckles turned white. She glanced at Rafe, who was frantically strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat with a look that screamed, "What has my life become?" She keyed her comm to the ship's main frequency, broadcasting to her entire crew, to her mother, to anyone out there listening. "This message is for the Empress. I am not eliminating the Starborn. I am validating him." The fighter surged forward, a black dart blasting out of the hangar. "He might be the only chance we have to save ourselves." She slammed the throttle forward, slingshotting the small ship around a dead moon and tearing a hole in space-time. The interceptor and the entire Zorelian Empire vanished behind them in a burst of cobalt light. The universe ripped open and spat them out on the other side. Rafe's world lurched as the sleek void cutter tumbled out of warp into a nauseating flood of green light. Alarms blared. The inertial dampener sputtered for half a second, slamming Rafe into his restraints hard enough to knock the wind out of him. "By all the gods, Princess, are you trying to kill us?" he yelled, his hands clamped on the console. "I was dodging an Imperial weapons lock," Sarinth snapped back, wrestling with the controls. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with fierce intensity. "They were tracking our warp trail. I had to risk an unstable jump." Rafe peered out the cockpit viewport and felt his stomach drop. They were drifting in a cosmic graveyard of churning acid-green gas. Floating below them, orbiting a colossal gas giant, was a tangled spiderweb of metal and light. It looked like a dozen starships had smashed into each other, and the survivors just kept building on the wreckage, lashing it all together with docking tubes and flickering neon signs. This wasn't Imperial space. This wasn't even civilized space. This was a place where the law came to die. "Where are we?" Rafe asked, his voice low. "The Rift. Specifically, Station Omega," Sarinth said, already guiding the fighter toward a cluster of blinking docking lights. "It's an illegal, neutral territory. Smugglers, bounty hunters, assassins. Your kind of crowd." "Hey," Rafe shot back. "My people recycle things. These people recycle other people. Big difference. We can hide the ship in a private bay. No one will ask questions as long as our credit chip is valid." "And is it?" Rafe asked. "Because my current credit rating is arrest on sight." Sarinth didn't reply. She just expertly maneuvered the fighter into a dark, pressurized hangar that reeked of spilled fuel and some kind of unidentifiable alien cooking. The bay door hissed shut behind them, sealing them in grime-caked privacy. Sarinth powered down the engines, and the sudden heavy silence was broken only by the soft tink-tink-tink of cooling metal. They sat there for a long moment, the adrenaline from the escape finally seeping away, leaving them exhausted and stuck together. "Okay," Rafe said, unbuckling his harness. "You want to go first or should I? I'm not really up on the proper etiquette for when you commit treason against your own mom and kidnap a guy with a glowing chest tattoo." Sarinth turned in her seat, the dim console light carving shadows on her face. She wasn't a princess anymore. Here, she was just a fugitive. "We need a place to lay low. We need supplies. And you," she said, her voice dropping, "need to learn what you are." They managed to find a room in a place called the Drifting Void, a hotel carved into the side of a hollowed-out asteroid that was part of the station's main structure. The room was small, smelled vaguely of damp metal, and the window was a single thick sheet of stressed plexiglass overlooking the swirling green gas giant. Neon signs from the levels below bathed everything in a restless, shifting glow of red and blue. Rafe chucked his borrowed jacket onto a cot that looked like it might have teeth. "All right, I've been a good sport. I fought your guards, got shot at, and took a nightmare trip across the galaxy. Time to talk. What is this? Starborn business?" Sarinth stood by the window, her arms crossed, a perfect, rigid silhouette against the chaos of lights outside. She was struggling to find the words. This wasn't a speech she'd ever rehearsed. "It's an old story," she began quietly. "A myth. A heresy, my mother would call it. It's the oldest Zarelian prophecy, from before we had an empire, from before we even took to the stars." She turned, her dark eyes locking onto his. "The legend says that in the galaxy's most desperate hour, when the empire is breaking apart and the great houses are at each other's throats, a warrior will emerge, the Valshaw, the Starborn, a being connected to the ancient spirit that guards the galaxy." Rafe let out a short, incredulous laugh, running a hand through his messy hair. "A guardian spirit? Fantastic. So what am I, some kind of space wizard?" "Don't you dare mock what you don't understand," she hissed, her royal temper flaring for a moment. "This spirit, this guardian, it's the source of the lost fleets. Imagine being told you're the chosen one, destined to awaken a legendary fleet of 1,000 ancient warships, the most powerful ever made. Sounds cool, right? Now imagine you're a scavenger whose biggest lifetime score was a box of stale protein bars." Rafe just stared at the princess, then let out a short, bitter laugh. "A lost fleet? A magic warrior? Princess, take a good look. I steal junk for a living. You've got the wrong guy." He tapped the strange, swirling pattern on his chest. "This thing is a birthmark. A weird one, that's it." "It stopped my plasma blade," Sarinth insisted, her voice like steel. "I felt the energy. It didn't just block my attack. It absorbed it." "Static electricity. A 1 in a billion fluke. I don't know," Rafe said, pacing the tiny room like a caged animal. "But I'm not some myth. I'm just a guy from Cygnus 3 who got orphaned and learned how to hotwire an airlock to survive. I'm not the key to saving the galaxy." Sarinth watched him, her gaze sharp and analytical. "Your denial is convenient, but it doesn't change what I saw. What the whole galaxy has now seen on that security feed." Rafe threw his hands up in frustration. "Then what do you want from me? You expect me to just wave my hand and make 1,000 ghost ships appear? I can't. I'm just Rafe." A heavy silence hung in the air. Sarinth finally looked away, out the viewport. "We need supplies," she said, her tone shifting. All business now. "And I need proof," she continued. "The legends say the Starborn is drawn to relics of the First Kingdom. This station hosts the biggest black market in the sector. If there's a relic down there, we'll find it." She locked eyes with him, a challenge in her gaze. "And you will touch it." The station's black market wasn't really a market. It was a full-blown assault on the senses, They called it the Undercrawl, a massive cavern carved into the station's core. It was a chaotic jungle of flickering holographic ads, sputtering neon signs, and open-flame food stalls. The air was thick with steam, exotic spices, and the sharp tang of ozone. Beings Rafe had only seen on bounty hunter pucks shoved past them. There were 6 armed merchants, hulking reptilian bodyguards, and slender masked figures whispering in languages that seemed to twist the air. Sarenth pulled the hood of her borrowed cloak low, but it was useless. She stuck out like a diamond in a junkyard, moving with a poised grace that was completely alien to this place. People stared. Rafe, however, felt right at home. He walked with a familiar, confident swagger, his eyes constantly scanning, mapping out exits, threats, and opportunities. "Stay close, Your Highness," he muttered, steering her away from a vendor selling cages of squirming live creatures. "This isn't the royal palace. You look at someone the wrong way here, you wake up missing a kidney." "I can handle myself," she whispered back, though her hand never strayed far from the plasma hilt hidden beneath her cloak. "I'm sure you can," he said, "but I'd rather not get into a laser sword fight over a stolen wallet." They pushed deeper, into the aisles where the truly illegal and ancient artifacts were sold. They passed weapons dealers and tech scrappers, finally reaching the antiquity stalls. One was run by an ancient, four-eyed being who looked like he'd been chiseled from rock himself. He was busy polishing a dusty, cracked helmet. Sarenth stopped dead, her breath catching in her throat. There, on a velvet cushion in the middle of the stall, sat a small, dark object. It looked like a piece of obsidian carved into a complex, interlocking disc. It was definitely Zarelian, Rafe could tell, but it was old, ancient. It just felt heavy. "What is that?" Sarenth asked the vendor, her voice perfectly level. The vendor's 4 eyes swiveled to focus on her. "Ah, a lady with a discerning eye. That is old. Very old. From the first expansion. A navigator's tool, some say. Worth a fortune." "It's junk," Rafe cut in immediately, stepping forward. "A worthless knockoff. I'll give you 20 credits for it. For scrap." The vendor hissed. 50,000 credits to you, lovely lady. A special discount." Sarenth paid them no mind. She was mesmerized by the disc. "Rafe," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Touch it." Rafe shot her a look. "Are you kidding me? He's going to try and charge me for breathing on it." "Touch it. Now." Rafe let out a long sigh. "This is so stupid." He turned back to the stall. "Fine. Let me just see the craftsmanship on this piece of junk." He reached out, his fingers hovering over the cold, dark stone. He expected nothing to happen. Maybe a little static shock, or another ridiculously high price from the vendor. But the second his skin made contact, 2 things happened at once. First, a searing heat erupted in his chest. He grunted, glancing down. Through the fabric of his shirt, he could see his birthmark. It was glowing again, pulsing with that same impossible, vibrant blue light, bright enough to be seen even in the market's neon chaos. Second, the relic screamed. It wasn't a sound you could hear, but a feeling, a raw burst of energy that shot up his arm like lightning. The vendor scrambled back, all 4 of his eyes wide with terror. The obsidian disc flashed, and a million tiny points of light erupted from its surface. But they didn't scatter. They streamed onto Rafe's arm, flowing together on his skin. He cried out, trying to pull his hand back, but the light clung to him. It was etching itself into his forearm, from his wrist all the way to his elbow. It was a map, a complex 3-dimensional star chart, glowing with the same blue light as his birthmark. It swirled for a moment, settled into place, and then, as quickly as it appeared, it faded, sinking right into his skin, leaving no trace behind. The entire market had fallen silent. Everyone was just staring. Rafe was breathing heavily, his arm tingling. He looked at Sarenth. Her face was a mask of pure, terrified awe, her hand clamped over her mouth. She took a shaky step closer, her eyes locked on his. In that instant, all the royal condescension, all the frustration, had vanished. All that was left was wonder. "You weren't lying," she whispered, the words sounding like they were pulled from deep inside her. "It's all real." "The princess is correct." A new voice, smooth, cold, and amplified, sliced through the silence. "Step away from the human. He is compromised." Rafe and Sarinth spun around. Standing at the end of the aisle were three figures. They were tall and slender, encased in skin-tight matte black armor that seemed to swallow the neon light around it. Their faces were hidden by mirrored crimson visors. These were not Zarelian royal guards. These soldiers were too sleek, too silent. They held thin, lethal-looking rifles. "Who are you?" Saranth demanded, her hand instinctively gripping her plasma blade. The lead figure tilted its head slightly. On its shoulder, a small silver symbol glinted, a stylized, weeping star. Saranth froze. "The Crimson Hand," she breathed, a new kind of dread in her voice. "My sister's personal guard." "Princess Illyria sends her regrets," the agent said. "She cannot allow this heresy to threaten the imperial line. The human must be cleansed. You are to be retrieved, for your own protection, of course." Rafe glanced at Sarinth. "Your sister," he said, "sent assassins after you." "She's never been subtle," Sarinth gritted out. "And they're not here to negotiate." The agent raised its rifle. "Surrender, Your Highness." Rafe didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed her arm. "Run!" He shoved her hard into a side alley just as the agent fired. The blast wasn't plasma. It was a concussion bolt that completely vaporized the stall they'd been standing in. The crowd exploded into a panicked stampede. "This way," Rafe yelled, pulling Sarinth through the chaos. He knew this dance well. "We have to get back to the ship," Sarinth shouted over the roar. "No time. They'll be waiting for us." Rafe kicked open a grated door marked Maintenance and pulled her inside, into a dark, greasy tunnel. "We go down," he said, "into the guts of this station." They ran. The tunnels were a dizzying maze of steaming pipes, sparking electrical wires, and narrow catwalks over terrifying drops. Behind them, they could hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of the assassins' armored boots. Then a new sound joined the chase, a high-pitched, electronic whine. "What is that?" Saranth called out, easily leaping a gap between two catwalks. "Drones!" Rafe yelled back. Half a dozen silver spheres, each the size of his fist, zipped around the corner. They moved with terrifying speed, their red optical sensors glowing. They opened fire, and laser bolts stitched the air around them, slicing through pipes and sending jets of high-pressure steam hissing across the corridor. Sarinth ignited her plasma blade with an iconic snap hiss that echoed in the tight space. She didn't even break her stride as a drone dove straight for her. She spun, and her brilliant blue blade cut it cleanly in half. It exploded in a shower of sparks. She gracefully sliced two more out of the air. It was beautiful, deadly, and it suddenly hit Rafe that he was running for his life alongside a genuine warrior princess. "This isn't a duel!" Rafe shouted. He grabbed a heavy wrench from a wall bracket and hurled it at another drone, shattering its casing. "We can't fight all of them!" Just then, the three assassins appeared at the far end of the corridor. They dropped to one knee in perfect unison, raising their rifles. "Down!" Rafe yelled, tackling Sarinth and shoving her through another open hatch. They tumbled down a gravity chute, falling 2 stories in a swirl of darkness before landing hard on a massive pile of refuse in a vast cargo bay. The air here was different. Cold. It smelled of the void of space. "We're near the outer hull," Sarinth said, getting to her feet. "Good." Rafe scanned the bay. It was filled with shipping containers, dormant cargo lifters, and, over there, an emergency airlock. The assassins dropped from the chute above them. They landed silently like cats, their rifles already up and scanning for targets. "Rafe," Sarinth said, stepping in front of him, her plasma blade held high. Go, get that airlock open. I'll hold them off. Are you crazy? They'll cut you down in seconds. They are loyal to my sister, she said, her eyes fixed on the approaching soldiers. But I am still Imperial blood. They will hesitate to strike the killing blow. They will turn you to ash. Now go! Rafe froze. He looked at her, standing her ground against 3 cloaked killers, her face a mask of determination, her blue blade humming with energy. She was magnificent, and she was completely out of her mind. He turned and ran. He bolted for the airlock controls, his fingers dancing across the panel. It was ancient tech, easy to bypass. Got it, it's cycling. The assassins fanned out, advancing on Sarenth, flanking her. This is your last chance, princess, one of them rasped. For Zeril, Sarenth screamed, and she charged. She moved in a blur, engaging the agent in the center, their fight a dizzying storm of blue plasma against an electrified stun baton. She was faster, more skilled, but she was outnumbered. One of the other assassins raised its rifle, but it wasn't aiming at her. It was aiming at Rafe. They framed me for a crime I didn't commit, just so a spoiled princess could drag me halfway across the galaxy. But the real injustice? I was starting to think she was the one who needed saving, and I was the only one who could do it. Stick with me for a minute, and I'll tell you how a street rat and a royal pain ended up saving an entire empire. It all started when her sister's assassins cornered us. Move! I yelled, diving as a laser bolt turned the wall where my head had been into molten metal. The airlock hissed open behind me. Come on! Sarenth kicked her opponent square in the chest, giving herself just enough room to sprint for the door, grabbing my hand as we tumbled inside and the heavy door slammed shut. Where does this go? She panted, trying to catch her breath. Outside! I yelled, slapping the control for the outer door. It's our only shot! She looked at me like I was crazy. We don't have suits! I just pointed. Clamped to the wall were 2 emergency re-entry packs, basically a tiny thruster and a heat shield. As the assassin started cutting through the door, the metal glowing cherry red, I grabbed the packs and shoved one at her. Strap in, I said. It's a quick flight to the hangar. The outer door opened to the terrifying silence of space, and a swirling green gas giant filled our entire view. You're insane! Sarenth yelled, clipping the pack to her belt. You kidnapped me! I yelled back. So we're even! On 3! 3! We jumped. The tiny thrusters shot us out into the green-lit void. I steered us along the station's scarred hull as the assassins burst from the airlock behind us, their shots missing us by inches. We zipped around a huge antenna and aimed for the dark slash of her private hangar bay. We hit the floor in a clumsy, rolling crash just as her fighter's bay door sealed behind us. Get in! Sarenth was already in the cockpit, firing up the engines. I scrambled into the co-pilot's seat as the ship blasted out of the bay. Where are we going? I yelled, strapping myself in. They know we're here! That map on your arm, the relic! Where did it point? She shouted back. I closed my eyes, picturing the light, the swirling star charts I'd somehow memorized. Trasari, I said, opening my eyes. A moon in the Trasari system. It's all green. A jungle world. I know it, she said, her fingers flying across the controls. Uncharted. Perfect. She slammed the throttle, and the station, the gas giant, and her sister's goons vanished as we jumped into the blue-white tunnel of warp space. Our arrival was less of a landing and more of a controlled crash. The ship, damaged from the escape, screamed as it tore through a jungle canopy so thick it looked like a solid green ocean. Branches as thick as my body scraped at the cockpit before we hit the ground with a bone-shattering thud. Then, silence. All I could hear was my own pulse and the drip, drip, drip of fuel. Well, I said, unbuckling myself. Any landing you can walk away from. Sarenth was already pushing the cockpit open. The air that hit us was hot, wet, and smelled of rain, flowers, and decay, and the jungle was alive with a symphony of chirps and roars. It was night, and 3 massive moons cast a silvery light over everything. We stumbled out of the wreck, alive and completely alone. We can't stay here, Sarenth said, her voice hoarse. The ship's locator. Busted, I cut in, checking the fried electronics. The crash took care of that. We're off the grid for now. We salvaged what we could. A med kit, a water purifier, and her plasma blade. About 100 yards from the wreck, I used my street skills and a power cell to start a small, smokeless fire. Out there, she wasn't a princess, and I wasn't a thief. We were just two survivors, watching the flames as tiny, glowing fireflies began to drift through the air, turning the clearing into a dream. You were good back there, she said, tending to a cut on her arm without looking at me. In the market, in the tunnels, you knew what to do. I just shrugged, poking the fire with a stick. You grow up on the streets of Cygnus III, you learn when to run. I paused. You weren't so bad yourself, Your Highness. That move with the 2 drones was impressive. A tiny smile touched her lips. Royal training. The silence between us returned, but this time it was different, less angry. Why? I asked softly. Why me? Why was your prophecy about a human? To your people, we're nothing. She winced at my words, and for the first time her royal mask crumbled completely. She just looked tired. My people, the Zarelians, we're old, Rafe, and we're dying. We've been fighting the same pointless wars for 1,000 years. My sister wants the throne so badly she'd kill me for it, and my mother, she'd kill you to protect the lie that we are all powerful. She stared into the fire. Maybe the prophecy isn't about a great warrior. Maybe it's about humility, about admitting we can't save ourselves. She looked at me then, and I saw the crushing weight of an empire on her shoulders. I was an orphan, I said quietly. Never knew my parents. I grew up in a state-run dump. At night I'd sneak up to the roof and just look at the stars. I could see the Zarelian Nebula from there, this big purple smudge in the sky. It looked so perfect. I used to dream about coming here, about being more than just gutter trash. I gave a sad little laugh. Guess I got my wish. Sarinth really looked at me then, not as a thief, but as a man who dreamed of the stars and now had a map to a forgotten temple etched onto his skin. Her eyes drifted to my chest, where my shirt was still ripped open from our earlier fight. The firelight danced over the intricate, sleeping lines of the tattoo. Does it hurt? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. No, I said. It just hums sometimes. The jungle sounds seemed to fade away as she leaned forward slightly. May I? My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't know what she was asking, but I nodded anyway. She reached out, her fingers hesitant and cool. The moment her soft fingertips grazed my skin, I sucked in a breath. It wasn't a shock. It was a connection. A quiet warmth flowed from her touch, through the tattoo, and straight into my soul. I saw flashes in my mind. An ancient scroll, an old woman's angry face, a child with dark hair. Sarinth gasped and snatched her hand back like she'd been burned. What was that? I asked, my voice rough. What did you see? Nothing, she said, way too quickly. I just felt it. The power. It's real. She scrambled to her feet and walked to the edge of the clearing with her back to me, trembling. I'd seen her face down assassins without flinching. But this had shattered her. She looked up at the 3 moons, her hands clenched into fists. All my life, she whispered, her voice thick with a terrible realization. I was trained to protect the throne, to honor our bloodline, to dismiss the myths of our enemies as lies. She turned to face me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. If this is real, she said, her voice breaking, if you are real, then my entire world, everything I've ever believed, is a lie. In the morning, the jungle felt different. The air was a heavy green-gold haze, buzzing with unseen life. Sarinth hadn't slept. She'd just been watching me, this walking, breathing heresy that proved her faith was built on sand. I woke with a jolt, my hand flying to my chest, but the tattoo was just a faint scar again. The air between us was electric with unspoken questions. So, I said, my voice hoarse. What now, Your Highness? She stood up, her movements stiff as she locked her vulnerability away again. We find this temple. The map, she said. Did it show you a location? I closed my eyes, focusing on the memory of the light. It wasn't a chart. It was a line of sight. I looked past the dense canopy toward a cluster of jagged, black mountain peaks in the distance. That way, I said, pointing. It showed me those mountains. There's something hidden at their base. Then we move, Saranth declared. All business again. We have no food, little water, and my sister knows what system we're in. We're on the clock. And with that, the princess and the thief started their journey, not knowing that her sister's deadliest hunter was already closing in. But we made it to the temple. And when Sarinth placed her hand on a stone altar next to mine, the tattoos on both our arms lit up, revealing not a prophecy of a warrior, but a blueprint for a new beginning for her people. That's when her sister showed up, but she didn't expect me to use the temple's own defenses against her ship, disabling it without firing a shot. The revenge was Sarinth broadcasting her sister's treachery to the entire empire. In the end, I wasn't just some gutter trash. I was the one who helped a princess save her people from themselves, proving that sometimes the most unlikely person can change the universe. The jungle didn't just resist them. It tried to kill them. This was no walk in the park. It was a war. They fought their way through vines as thick as a man's arms, waded through waist-deep muck that smelled of rotten eggs, and scrambled up sheer faces of slick, black rock. Rafe, the scavenger, moved with a messy but effective rhythm, born from a lifetime of survival. Sarinth, the royal warrior, moved with the flawless, relentless grace of a trained killer, her plasma blade humming to life in short, sharp bursts to incinerate a path or slice down the venomous, whip-like creatures that rained down from the canopy. They didn't speak, saving their breath for the brutal climb, but a silent, grudging respect was being forged in the sweat and mud. He'd offer a hand to haul her up a ledge. She'd spin and carve a stalking predator in two before it could pounce on him. After 6 grueling hours, they found it. It wasn't some grand temple. It was a wound in the mountainside, a perfectly flat rock face where the jungle just stopped. 2 massive statues, worn smooth by 1,000 years of rain, stood like sentinels on either side of a crack in the stone so thin you could barely see it. The temple, Sarinth breathed, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her weapon. Looks more like a cave to me, Rafe grumbled. But even he could feel it. The air here was different, heavy, silent. And the strange tattoo on his chest began to itch, a low, faint tingle he couldn't ignore. They squeezed through the opening. The tunnel sloped down, away from the jungle light and into the dark. But the walls were lined with veins of the same glowing blue-green fungus they'd seen in the swamp, casting an eerie, ghost-like light. The air turned cool and dry. They finally stepped out into a massive circular chamber, a perfect dome that seemed impossibly carved from the very heart of the mountain. In the exact center, on a raised platform, stood a single door made of obsidian. It was sleek, seamless, and marked with the star and crescent of the Zarelian Empire, but the design felt far older than anything Rafe had ever seen. "A vault," Sarinth whispered, her eyes wide with reverence. This is First Kingdom technology." She walked toward it, the sound of her boots echoing in the crushing silence. A single hand-shaped indentation was set in the door, a DNA scanner. "It's sealed," she said, "but it's Zarelion, Royal Zarelion." She placed her own pale, elegant hand into the scanner. The vault hummed to life. A red light began to pulse. A crisp, synthesized voice filled the chamber, speaking in her own modern tongue. "Access denied. Bloodline unrecognized." Sarinth snatched her hand back as if she'd been burned. What? That's impossible. I am third in line to the throne. My blood is pure. Access denied, the voice repeated, calm and final. Maybe it's just broken, Rafe offered, even though he knew that was a lie. The tingling in his chest was now a steady hum. He could feel the door, feel it vibrating with a strange energy that seemed to be calling to him. This technology doesn't break, Sarinth shot back, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and confusion. It's sealed against me, against my family. Let me try, Rafe said quietly. Sarinth spun around to face him. You're a human scavenger. I'm also the guy with the magic tattoo that led us straight here, Rafe retorted. He strode past her, his heart pounding against his ribs. He braced himself for a shock, an alarm, anything. He pressed his calloused, dirty hand into the indentation. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then a new sound echoed in the chamber, a low, welcoming chime. The light on the panel shifted from angry red to a deep, brilliant blue. Access granted, the voice announced. But this time, it spoke in the ancient, forgotten Zarelian dialect Sarinth's grandmother used to speak. Greetings, blood of the Forsaken. Sarinth gasped, hearing the old tongue. With a sound like a giant mechanical sigh, the seams on the obsidian door glowed blue. The massive slab split into 1,000 intricate pieces that retracted smoothly into the walls, revealing a dark, dust-filled chamber beyond. Rafe glanced back at Sarinth. Her face was pale as a ghost. Blood of the Forsaken, she whispered, her words barely audible. No clue, Rafe said, stepping across the threshold. But whatever it is, it likes me. The inner vault was small, more like a tomb. In the center, on a pedestal of black stone, sat a single object made of crystal. It was a disk, no bigger than Rafe's hand, made of interlocking metal and crystal that seemed to shift and reform right before his eyes. As they stepped closer, the room flooded with light that didn't come from the walls, but from the air itself. A human-shaped figure flickered into existence in the center of the room, standing over the pedestal. It was a hologram, an ancient one, crackling with static and raw power. He was a man, a human, but taller and broader than Rafe, his face scarred and weathered by countless battles. He wore a strange, archaic armor that was a mix of high technology and primitive design. He looked like a warrior king from a forgotten age. He opened his mouth, and the same ancient, guttural language from the vault filled the room. Sarinth, who had been forced to study the old texts as a child, began to translate, her voice shaking. He says, "If you are seeing this, the long night has come," she whispered. "If you are seeing this, the blood of the Forsaken has returned. A pact has been broken. The guardians of the fleet are sleeping." The holographic warrior looked directly at Rafe, his eyes seeming to pierce through time itself. "The Zarelian throne has become poison," Sarinth translated, her voice catching in her throat. "They have suppressed the truth. They fear the bond. They fear you." "Me," Rafe breathed. The warrior pointed, not at Rafe, but at the crystalline object on the pedestal. They were sworn to guard this, the stellar sigil, the key to the bond, the key to the lost fleet. Instead, they hid it. They banished your bloodline. They forsook us. The warrior looked at Rafe again, his face a mask of ancient sorrow and burning rage. "Take the sigil. Reclaim the blood right. It will bond to you, as it did to me. It will rewrite your path. Do not let the throne. Do not let them poison you as they did me." The message stuttered, broke apart into static, and then vanished. The room plunged back into darkness, leaving only the blue glow from the exit. Rafe and Sarinth stood frozen in the suffocating silence. "My family," Sarinth finally said, her voice hollow and dead. "They didn't just hide a myth. They betrayed a sacred pact. They banished his bloodline." She looked at Rafe, a terrible dawning horror spreading across her face. "Your bloodline?" Rafe didn't say a word. He just stared at the object on the plinth, the stellar sigil. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and picked it up. It felt cold, lifeless, just a fancy piece of metal and crystal. He held it in his palm, waiting. Nothing happened. "Maybe it's broken," he said, a strange note of disappointment in his voice. "No," Sarinth said. "The hologram said it needs to bond. It's waiting for you." Rafe squeezed it, closing his eyes and focusing on the hum inside his chest. He pushed, not with his muscles, but with his will. "Wake up," he thought. His tattoo exploded with heat. A searing blue fire pulsed from his chest, shot down his arm, and poured into his hand. The sigil in his palm flashed, instantly coming alive. Hundreds of tiny, hair-thin filaments, as sharp and cold as needles, shot out from the crystal and burrowed deep into his palm. Rafe cried out, dropping to one knee. It wasn't pain. It was information. A tidal wave of it. He felt power, immense, dormant power that had been coiled and waiting just beneath his skin his entire life. He could feel the sigil thrumming, now a part of him, bonded to his very DNA. Just as suddenly, the light faded. The needles retracted, leaving behind a faint, new pattern on his palm that perfectly mirrored the tattoo on his chest. He stood up slowly, breathing hard. He was still Rafe, but he was also more. Sarinth was just staring at him, her eyes wide with shock. She had seen it all. The proof, the power, the undeniable truth. This scavenger she'd despised, this man from the gutter, was the heir to a lost legacy. He was the key. He was the one thing her family had feared for 1,000 years. And yet, he looked so lost. He was staring at the sigil in his hand, this key to a fleet of legendary warships, with the same confused, desperate eyes he'd had back in the hangar bay. He was just a man who had only ever dreamed of the stars and had just had the weight of the entire galaxy dropped onto his shoulders. And in that moment, all the royalty, all the training, all the anger inside Sarinth just broke. She closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. Her touch was like an electric shock. "Sarinth," he whispered. "You are not gutter trash," she breathed, her voice raw with emotion. "You were never meant for just survival." And then she kissed him. It wasn't a soft, gentle kiss. It was impulsive and desperate and completely overwhelming. It tasted of ozone and jungle rain and 1,000 years of lies finally collapsing. It was a princess and a scavenger shattering a generations-old taboo in the heart of a forgotten mountain. Rafe, stunned for a split second, responded instantly. His hand, the one now bonded to the sigil, came up to grip her arm, pulling her even closer. It was an explosion. Boom! A deep rolling thunder vibrated through the stone beneath their feet, shaking dust from the ceiling. That wasn't thunder. They broke apart, breathless. "What was that?" Rafe asked. "Trouble," Sarinth said, her eyes flashing as the warrior princess snapped back into focus. She ignited her plasma blade, bathing the vault in its blue light. That was orbital bombardment. They raced back through the tunnel, bursting out into the harsh jungle daylight. The air was filled with the scream of powerful engines. A ship, sleek, silver, and bristling with weapons, hung in the sky directly above them. It wasn't a standard cruiser. It was a Reaper-class warship, fast, lethal, and personal. The Crimson Needle. It hovered right over the temple entrance, its main plasma cannon glowing as it charged for another shot. "Get back inside!" Rafe yelled, pulling Sarinth toward the cave. But a voice, amplified and dripping with cold, aristocratic boredom, echoed through the valley. "Oh, don't hide, little sister. You're making this so very, very messy." A pillar of blue light descended from the ship, and the holographic image of a woman materialized in the clearing. She was Zarelian, stunningly beautiful, and looked like a colder, sharper version of Sarinth. She wore the immaculate white uniform of an Imperial Fleet Admiral. "Princess Illyria," Sarinth spat, stepping out into the open, her blade held high. "Here to clean up Mother's mess?" Illyria smiled, a razor-thin expression. "No, little sister. I'm here to fix yours." The holographic image of Illyria stared down at them with pure contempt. "Look at you," she sneered, "running around with that. You've infected the entire galaxy with a disease. You've given these pathetic rebels a false idol to worship. It's just embarrassing." Her icy gaze shifted to Rafe. "And you, the human, Rafe Dreen. Have you heard of me?" Rafe clutched the stellar sigil in his hand and stepped up beside Sarinth. "Oh, I think everyone has," he shot back with a smirk he didn't feel. "You're the celebrity of the moment." "Then be a good little myth and hand over that toy you're holding," Illyria commanded. "And as for you, sister, do this and I'll personally explain your cooperation to the Empress. I might even let you rot away in a very deep, very dark cell." "And what if we say no?" Sarinth asked, her voice tight. Illyria's smile was thin, like a lizard's. "My warship, the Crimson Needle, has its cannons aimed at the foundations of this temple. I will turn this entire valley to glass, bury you both, and tell the galaxy their precious myth died right alongside the thief who led him astray. The choice is yours." Sarinth went rigid. She knew they were completely outmatched. "Don't listen to a word she says, Rafe. She's a viper." Rafe glanced at Sarinth, so defiant even in a hopeless situation. Then he looked at Illyria's hologram, oozing smug victory. He felt the strange hum of the sigil in his palm, a coiled, waiting power. He had no idea what it really did, but he'd been a street brawler and a junk scavenger his whole life, and he knew a bluff when he saw one. So he flashed his old, charming, "I'm just a poor scavenger" smile. "Whoa, hang on a second," he said, holding up his free hand. Let's circle back to that first offer. The let me live part? I'm extremely interested in that." Sarinth's head snapped toward him. "Rafe, no!" Her face was a perfect picture of shock and betrayal. Illyria's hologram actually let out a sharp, ugly laugh. "Oh, what a smart boy. See, sister? He's a survivor, not a savior." "That's me," Rafe said, taking a few steps forward, deliberately putting distance between himself and Sarinth. "I'm just a guy who got in way over his head. You want this artifact? Fine. You want the princess? She's all yours. I just want to go home. I'll take the deal. Full pardon, witness protection, the works. Sounds a heck of a lot better than getting vaporized in a cave on some jungle moon." "Rafe, you can't," Sarinth whispered, her voice cracking with despair. "A very wise choice, scavenger," Illyria purred. "Now place the device on the ground and back away." Sure thing, Rafe said, glancing down at the stellar sigil. "So, this is what all the fuss is about. This little trinket." He looked up at the colossal warship hanging in the sky. He looked at Illyria's smug, holographic face. "You know," he said, his voice suddenly calm and clear, "you really should have just shot us when you had the chance." "What?" Illyria's smile evaporated. Rafe squeezed the sigil. He didn't know what he was doing. He just pushed his will into it. He thought about the ship. He thought about making it stop. He poured every ounce of his fear, his anger, and his desperate hope into that little crystal device. The sigil didn't glow or explode. Instead, it thrummed with a deep, subsonic pulse that Rafe felt in his bones. The very ground beneath him vibrated. Then, with a sound like the universe cracking a whip, the sigil unleashed a visible, expanding ring of pure blue energy. The wave washed over Rafe and Sarinth. It tore through Illyria's hologram, dissolving it into static. And then, it hit the Crimson Needle. The effect was immediate. The warship's engines, which had been screaming with power, coughed, sputtered, and fell completely silent. Every light on its hull, every glowing weapon port, flickered once and died. For one impossible second, the ship, 250,000 tons of dead metal, just hung in the air, and then it dropped. It smashed into the jungle canopy a mile away in a deafening, catastrophic avalanche of tearing metal and splintering trees. "Come on," Rafe yelled, grabbing Sarinth's hand. "That's not going to keep them down for long." They ran, plunging back into the dense jungle, racing for their own damaged ship. But Illyria wasn't done yet. As her ship went down, the dying engines had ignited the forest. The dry floor of the jungle went up like a firebomb. The world around them became a roaring orange inferno. They ran hand in hand, the intense heat blistering their skin, thick smoke choking their lungs as trees engulfed in flames crashed down all around them. "We're almost there!" Rafe shouted over the roar. And that's when he heard it, a sharp, snap hiss. A figure stepped out of the smoke. A Crimson Hand assassin, one who'd either survived the crash or, more likely, had been deployed just before it. The assassin's black armor was scorched, but its rifle was steady. The agent fired a single bolt of crimson plasma. It wasn't aimed at Sarinth. It was aimed directly at Rafe. He had no time to move, no time to even process it. "No!" Sarinth screamed. She shoved him, hard, throwing herself in front of him like a living shield. Rafe watched in horrified, slow motion as the plasma bolt that should have hit his heart slammed into her side. Sarinth cried out, a high, sharp sound that was cut brutally short. The blast threw her to the ground, where she lay perfectly still. A smoking, blackened hole burned through her jacket. The assassin raised its rifle to fire again. Rafe didn't see fear. All he saw was red. A cold, pure rage flooded him, something he had never felt before. He raised the stellar sigil, aimed it at the soldier, and pushed. A focused, concussive blast of blue energy shot from his hand. This wasn't a pulse, it was a fist. It hit the agent square in the chest, sending the soldier flying backward into a burning tree. They didn't get back up. Rafe didn't hesitate. He scrambled to Sarinth's side and scooped her into his arms. She was terrifyingly light. He threw her over his shoulder and ran. He wasn't a scavenger anymore. He wasn't some myth. He was just a man carrying the only thing in the galaxy that mattered to him. And he would not let her die. He burst through a final wall of flame and smoke and half tumbled into the clearing where their damaged ship, the Void Cutter, was waiting. He managed to get her inside, slamming the cockpit hatch shut and sealing out the choking smoke. He laid her gently on the deck, in the narrow space between the seats. She was breathing, but just barely. Shallow, ragged gasps. The plasma bolt had torn through her side. It was a vicious, cauterized wound, but it was deep, and it was killing her. "No, no, no," he panted, scrambling for the medkit they'd salvaged. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to save me and then die." He found it, the Zerelion Healing Serum, a thin, crystalline tube filled with a glowing, bright green fluid, an auto-injector. He had no clue how it worked, and he didn't care. He ripped open her jacket, exposing the scorched, ruined flesh. "This better work," he gritted out, and jammed the injector against her side. With a sharp hiss, the green fluid flooded into the wound. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, the flesh began to move. The green liquid seemed to pull the wound together, knitting skin and muscle. The burned tissue sloughed away, replaced by new, healthy pink skin. It happened impossibly fast. It was completely unnatural, and it was the most beautiful thing Rafe had ever seen. Sarinth's shallow breathing hitched, deepened, and then finally settled into a steady rhythm. The lines of pain on her face softened. Her eyes flickered, but remained closed. She was alive. Rafe collapsed against the wall, his entire body trembling from adrenaline and terror. He had to get them out of there. He climbed into the pilot's seat, his hands shaking so badly it took him 3 tries to hit the ignition sequence. The port engine screamed in protest, but it finally caught. He lifted the ship just high enough to clear the burning treetops and just flew. He flew for miles, completely blind, pushing the damaged ship to its limits until he found a high, wind-swept plateau far away from the fire. He landed the ship with a hard, graceless bump and finally powered everything down. And then there was only silence. He sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind howling outside and the steady, quiet sound of Sarinth breathing. Eventually, he climbed out of the pilot's seat and switched on the cabin's dim, red emergency lights. Her eyes were open. She was pale and covered in soot, but she was awake, and she was watching him. They just stared at each other for a long moment, the princess who had given up her empire and the thief who had just held the power of a god in his hand. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You protected me," he whispered back, kneeling beside her. "I thought you were going to—" "I know," she said softly. The adrenaline was gone. The shock was gone. There was only the red-lit cabin, the quiet, and the charged, impossible space between them. The impulsive kiss in the temple, the desperate run for their lives, the sacrifice. It had all burned away their last defenses. He reached out with a grimy hand and gently brushed a soot-stained lock of hair from her face. His fingers lingered on her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. He leaned in. This time it wasn't impulsive or desperate. It was slow. It was tender. It was a promise. Their lips met in a quiet, profound surrender. A kiss that tasted of smoke and survival and something brand new. Something neither of them yet had a name for. He held her, right there on the cold metal deck, as the 3 moons of Trasari rose in the sky outside the cockpit. And for the first time in his entire life, Rafe Dreen wasn't alone. Much later, Sarinth was sleeping soundly in the co-pilot's seat where he'd moved her. Rafe finally drifted off, but it wasn't the restless sleep of a scavenger. It was the deep, dream-filled sleep of a king. The vision came again, but this time it was clear. He saw the lost fleet, 1,000 black ships hanging dormant in the rings of a dead star. He saw the golden, crystalline throne of the ancient Gurelian Empire, and he saw himself standing in a burning throne room, the stellar sigil blazing on his fist, his eyes glowing with that same awesome, terrible blue power. He dreamed of alien armies, the Zerelian and the Moor, bowing before him, an entire galaxy just waiting for his next word. Rafe woke up gasping, clutching the strange sigil on his chest. In the real world, the galaxy didn't care about love. It only cared about power. While he and Sarinth were hiding out on Trasari, finding a moment of peace in each other's arms, everything had caught fire. The viral video of their duel and his starborn reveal was the spark. But the news that Princess Irea's ship was disabled by an unknown energy blast? That was pure gasoline on the flames. It took Rafe 2 solid days of work, his hands deep in the mangled guts of Sarinth's ship, just to get the engine stable enough to jump. He'd always been a scavenger, but this was the salvage of a lifetime. As he worked, hands stained black with grease and hydraulic fluid, Princess Sarinth was busy with her own task. She sat in the cockpit, rerouting the communication system to tap into a hidden rebel data network. What she uncovered made her blood run cold. "It's worse than I thought," she said, her voice completely flat. Rafe glanced up, swiping sweat from his forehead. Her face, lit by the pale blue glow of the data slate, was a perfect mask of disbelief. "The Duel video is one thing," she said. "But now they're twisting Aria's failure. The rebels are telling everyone the human star took down an Imperial warship with a wave of his hand." "I didn't destroy it," Rafe mumbled, twisting a power conduit back into place. "I just shut it off." "It doesn't matter," Sarinth snapped. "You're not a person anymore, Rafe. You're a symbol. You're a flag." She swiped the screen, and a new image flared to life. It was a rebel propaganda poster. His face, or at least a stylized version of his glowing tattoo, was plastered over a shattered Imperial crest. The caption read, "The human starborn, the forsaken heir." "And then," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "there's this." She pulled up an official decree from the Empire, signed by her own mother. Princess Sarinth, third in line for the throne, was declared Keshvach, exiled, stripped of her name, rank, and birthright for treason and for consorting with a known terrorist. Right next to it was a second decree, a galactic bounty, open to every guild, every hunter. 5 million credits for the capture, dead or alive, of the human terrorist Rafe Dreen and his accomplice, the former Princess Sarinth. Rafe let the conduit slip from his fingers. 5 million, dead or alive. He almost let out a low whistle. "Well, that's a new personal best." "This isn't a joke, Rafe," Sarinth said, her voice trembling as her composure finally cracked. "That's my mother signing our death warrant. Every lowlife, every assassin, every guild from here to the Outer Rim will be coming for us. There's nowhere to hide." Rafe stood and stepped into the tiny cockpit, putting his hands on her shoulders. "You're right. We can't hide. So we go find answers." He looked down at the navigation console. "That dream I had. The hologram called me Blood of the Forsaken. That has to mean something. Your family didn't just hide a prophecy, Sarinth. They hid my family." Sarinth looked up, her sharp royal mind already sifting through facts and files. "Forsaken? There's only one record in the entire Imperial archive that uses that word when talking about humans." Her fingers danced across the console, pulling up a star chart. "Mirren," she breathed. "A dead world in the charred sector. It was where first contact happened, where the first treaty between Zerelians and humans was signed centuries ago. Now, it's just a graveyard. My family called the treaty the Forsaken Pact." "Then that's where we're going," Rafe said, sliding into the pilot's seat. The engines whined to life, and the ship began to shake violently. "Better strap in. It's going to be a rough ride." The trip to Mirren was filled with a long, suffocating silence. The ship was small, a void cutter built for speed, not long-haul comfort. They were practically sitting on top of each other in the cockpit. The connection they'd found back on the plateau was still there, a real warmth between them. But now it was buried under the cold reality of the bounty and the crushing weight of Rafe's mysterious past. He was terrified and desperately trying not to show it. She was grieving the loss of her entire world and failing miserably at hiding it. It happened on the third day of the journey. Rafe was trying to patch a leaking coolant line near a sparking console. He reached into the ship's emergency kit and grabbed a heavy metal hydrospanner. The second his fingers closed around the tool's grip, reality fractured. He wasn't on the void cutter anymore. He was in another cockpit, on another ship. Alarms were screaming, red lights flashing. A Zerelian pilot he'd never seen before was yelling, his knuckles white as he gripped this exact spanner, frantically trying to fix a panel as his patrol craft was being torn to shreds by pirate cannons. Rafe felt the man's surging panic, his bone-deep terror, and his final, agonizing breath as the cockpit imploded. "Ah!" Rafe shouted, throwing the spanner. It clattered against the far wall and fell to the floor. Suddenly he was back, breathing hard and drenched in a cold sweat. Sarinth was staring at him, her hand already on the hilt of her plasma blade. "Rafe, what's wrong?" I just... He stared at the spanner lying on the floor. I saw the last guy who used this. I saw him die. Sarinth's eyes went wide. She didn't look doubtful. She looked like she was solving a puzzle. The sigil, she whispered. On Trisari, you just pushed energy out. But now, it's changing you. She unclipped her own plasma blade from her belt, the one she'd used in the duel, the one she'd carried for years. She held it out to him, handle first. What? He asked, suddenly wary. Touch it, she ordered. He hesitated, not wanting to see another person's death. But he reached out, his grease-stained fingers brushing against the cool, worn metal of the hilt. A flash, not of death this time, but of pain. He saw her, a young Sarinth, no older than 12 years old. She was in a gleaming white training ring, facing Iria, who looked 2 years older and 100 times more vicious. Sarinth was crying, tears of pure frustration streaming down her cheeks, but her grip on her practice sword was iron firm. Iria fainted, then landed a deliberately painful and illegal stun shock right to Sarinth's ribs. Sarinth crumpled to the mat. And in the stands, Rafe saw her mother, the Empress, watching with a completely blank face. She turned and walked away, leaving her daughter sobbing on the floor. Rafe snatched his hand back, his heart aching for the little girl. He looked at Sarinth, truly looked at her, not as a princess, but as the girl in that ring. You never lost, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You just got better at hiding the pain. She always cheated. And your mother, she never even cared. Sarinth's hand was trembling, her knuckles white around the weapon's hilt. She could barely get a breath. He had seen it. He had seen the one crack in her perfect royal armor. The wound she'd kept hidden her whole life. It's a curse, Rafe said, looking at his own hands in horror. It's a power, Sarinth corrected him, her voice suddenly harder than he'd ever heard it, as she instantly started rebuilding her walls. The sigil is unlocking something in you. You're not just a key. You're a reader. You can see the past. Their fragile new beginning had just become infinitely more complicated. He realized he couldn't even touch her without seeing everything she was, everything she'd been through. And he wasn't sure either of them was ready for that. Mirren was a planetary corpse. A rust-red world scoured by ancient wars, with a thin atmosphere that tasted like iron. The skeletons of 1,000-year-old skyscrapers clawed at a bruised purple sky. They landed their battered ship near the ruins of the First Contact Embassy, a half-buried dome of shattered crystal. The records won't be in the city, Sarinth said, pulling her hood up to shield her from the biting, sand-filled wind. Imperial files say this world is dead, but the heretics, the ones who follow the old ways, they think it's sacred. The monks of the inner gaze, they were the ones who witnessed the pact. They're the ones who keep the original truth. So where are they? Rafe asked, scanning the empty, desolate horizon. Sarinth pointed toward a sheer cliff face, miles away. They're not on Mirren, she said. They're in it. They found the entrance just as the sun was setting. It wasn't a door. It was a monument. 2 massive, 12-foot-tall statues of ancient Zeralian warriors, carved from the red rock, stood guard over a dark crack in the cliff. As Rafe and Sarinth got closer, the wind suddenly died. The air began to crackle with energy. The sand at the statues' feet started to swirl. Then the statues moved. Stone ground against stone as their colossal heads turned. Their eyes, once just dark, empty holes, suddenly blazed with a burning blue light. They pulled their stone fists from the sand and raised them, blocking the path. "Living stone!" Sarenth breathed, igniting her plasma blade. The oldest Imperial defense system, guarded by the old pact. Wait, Rafe said. He felt a strange pull, not a memory, but a sense of recognition. The blue light in their eyes was the exact same blue as his tattoo. He stepped forward, walking right past Sarenth's glowing blade. He didn't raise a weapon. He just raised his right hand, palm out, showing them the faint, new sigil the artifact had branded onto his skin. The statues froze, their glowing eyes locked on his hand. The crackling energy died down to a low hum. Then, with a sound like grinding mountains, the two stone guardians knelt. They sank to the ground, bowed their heads, and became nothing more than lifeless stone once more. Rafe lowered his hand. Okay, I could get used to that. The door to the monastery itself was the next puzzle. It was a massive circular disc of black stone carved with rings that interlocked. No handle, no keypad, no scanner. A memory lock, Sarenth said, her voice tight with frustration. It's keyed to a specific thought, a core truth. Only a monk could open it. She placed her own hand on the door, closing her eyes and concentrating, thinking of her royal oath and her bloodline. Nothing happened. The door stayed shut. Rafe just looked at it. He was starting to get it. This wasn't about a key. This was about him. He placed his hand flat against the cold stone. He didn't push one of his own memories. He projected the one he'd received from the vault back on Trasari. What if you found out your entire life was a lie, built to hide a secret that could shatter an empire? For Rafe, an orphan who'd spent his life fighting for scraps, that lie was about to break. He pressed his hand to an ancient stone door and whispered the only clue to his past he'd ever had. Blood of the Forsaken. A soft chime answered. Massive stone rings spun and aligned, and the slab slid open, revealing a dark, quiet tunnel. This monastery was a silent network of caves, lit by the eerie glow of phosphorescent crystals. In the main chamber, a single, impossibly old Zarelian monk sat meditating. His skin looked like dried parchment, and his eyes were covered by a simple strip of black silk. Without moving, his raspy voice echoed, "The Forsaken blood returns." Rafe's voice felt too loud in the stillness. You knew we were coming." The monk replied, "The stone guardians told us, and the door confirmed it. You carry the key." The monk then turned his blindfolded head, seeming to look straight through Sarenth. "And you are the shield." Sarenth went rigid. "What did you just call me?" The monk simply gestured to a cavern wall. "The imperial texts you were taught are a lie, edited and incomplete. You know the prophecy of the Starborn, but you were never told the full story." Sarenth walked to the wall, which was covered in carvings, ancient and deep. She recognized the figure of the Starborn, wrapped in cosmic fire, but right beside him, where every book she'd ever read showed an empty space, there was a second figure, a Cerelian warrior, blade raised in a protective stance. She traced the etched lines, her fingers getting dusty as her voice trembled, translating the old language. "The Starborn will come to unite or to destroy," she read aloud. "But his path is not his own. He will be guarded, shielded by one of the poison bloodline. The Telvasha, the shield of the Starborn, a daughter of the throne who chooses truth over blood." She stumbled back, her hand dropping to her side. "This wasn't just his prophecy, it was mine too." Rafe turned to the monk, his heart pounding. "Enough prophecies. I need answers. My mother, my father. Who am I?" The monk's reply was simple. "You are the son of Arana Dreen." Rafe froze. "You knew her name." "She came here 30 years ago," the monk said, his voice softening. "A bright, brave human emissary, sent to build a bridge between our worlds. And she did. She fell in love. He fell. With who? Rafe demanded, his voice cracking. A Zerilion, the monk answered. A prince of the royal line. A man who still believed in the old pact, who dreamed of our two species uniting. His name was Kailin. Sarinth gasped. Kailin? That was my grandfather's brother, the one who died in a training accident. It was no accident, the monk said, his voice turning to ice. When Arana became pregnant, Kailin knew the child would carry the blood of both worlds. He believed you might be the one, the Starborn. But your grandfather, the Emperor, saw it as an abomination. A pollution of the pure bloodline, a threat to his throne. He ordered them both cleansed. The floor seemed to vanish beneath Rafe's feet. My father, Kailin, died defending your mother, the monk continued. He managed to get her here, wounded and desperate, carrying you. We hid her, then smuggled her off-world to human territory, to an orphanage on Cygnus 3. We made you both disappear. A life forsaken, all to protect you from the throne. Rafe was shaking. He wasn't just an orphan. He was the son of a murdered Zerelian prince, half human, half royalty. Sarinth was pale, her mind reeling. My grandfather. His brother. That makes us distant cousins. Yes, the monk confirmed. The bloodline is there. Faint, separated by a generation, but it is there. The air in the cave felt as heavy as lead. Rafe looked at Sarinth, the woman he'd kissed, the woman he'd fought beside. This changed everything. Cousins, Sarinth whispered, the word tasting like poison. She wasn't disgusted by him. She was horrified by the politics, the image, the rival houses. If this ever got out, they'd call it an abomination, Rafe finished for her, his voice flat. A corruption. They'd use it to destroy us both, and any hope the prophecy represents. The fragile, beautiful thing that had started to grow between them, born from fire and survival, now felt radioactive. Impossible. Sarinth instinctively took a step away from him. Sarinth, he pleaded. This, she whispered, her hands clenched into fists. This isn't simple. My family, my grandfather, murdered your family. Our blood isn't just related, it's poison. Just then, a piercing alarm shrieked through the monastery. Red warning lights Rafe hadn't even seen began to flash, bathing the ancient chamber in a bloody glow. They've found us, the monk said, his calm finally shattering as he scrambled to his feet. The Empress's bounty hunters. It's a siren call for every greedy killer in the galaxy. We have to go, Sarinth commanded, the warrior instantly taking over. Her personal turmoil was gone, replaced by cold, hard duty. They sprinted back through the tunnels, bursting out into the purple twilight of Mirren, and straight into a trap. They were completely surrounded. At least a dozen of the galaxy's worst scum formed a semicircle around them. A massive, four-armed creature that looked like a crab stood beside a pair of scaly reptilian Trojans and humans in scarred-up armor. All of them had their weapons aimed right at them. Well, 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 the crab-like leader clacked his pincers, his voice a bubbling synthesizer. The Starborn and the little traitor princess. 2 for the price of 1. The Empress is going to make us rich. A storm of laser fire erupted, filling the air with deadly red and green bolts. Get down! Sarinth yelled, igniting her blade. She became a blur of blue light, deflecting 2 shots that would have taken Rafe's head clean off. Rafe, the ship! Get to the ship! I'm not leaving you! He yelled back. They were pinned down against the cliff face, with no way to reach the ruins of the old embassy. One of the hunters, a human in a heavy helmet, armed and threw a plasma grenade. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc, landing right at Sarinth's feet. She saw it and tried to kick it away, but a nearby blast had thrown her off balance. She was too slow. Rafe watched it happen in horrifying slow motion. The glowing red grenade, Sarinth's foot missing it by an inch. The memory of her falling on Tresari. Not again. Time didn't slow down. It just stopped. Rafe felt the sigil in his pocket and the tattoo on his arm burn with a sudden, cold white fire. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't even breathing. He was just moving. He crossed the 10 feet between them in a blink. It wasn't a run. It was more like a jump, a short-range teleport. He grabbed Sarinth around the waist, pulling her tight against him. Then he pushed off the ground with a leap powered by something other than muscle, and they shot straight up into the air. They landed on a rocky ledge 30 feet above the ground, just as the grenade detonated below, sending a wave of heat and shrapnel washing harmlessly beneath their feet. Sarinth was breathless, clinging to him. "Rafe, how did you— Duck!" He didn't shout. He whispered it, pulling her down just as a sniper bolt sizzled through the air where her head had just been. He hadn't seen the sniper. He had felt the shot coming. Down below, the hunters were yelling in confusion. "Where'd they go?" "Up there! He's fast! Kill them! Kill them all!" Rafe stood up on the ledge and looked down at the chaos. He felt a cold, terrifying calm wash over him. He could feel the frantic thumping of Sarinth's heart against his back, the greedy pulse of the hunters below, even the dust motes dancing in the wind. He could see the path of their shots before they even aimed. The stellar sigil wasn't just a key. It was an engine, and it was rewriting his entire body. A hunter with a jetpack boosted toward them, blaster raised. Rafe didn't hesitate. He stepped off the ledge, but he didn't fall. He pushed off the air itself, slamming into the hunter. He didn't just fight. He was precise. A quick tap, and the hunter's wrist broke. Another tap, and the elbow dislocated. A final tap to a pressure point in the neck, and the hunter went limp, his jetpack sputtering. Rafe used the man's unconscious body to kick off, landing silently back in the middle of the bounty hunters. They all opened fire, but he was a ghost, a blur moving between the laser bolts. He was faster than fast. He was seeing the shots before they were even fired. He was a whisper in the chaos, disarming and disabling. A broken hand here, a shattered rifle there. He wasn't a killer. He was a storm. Unarmed, but he was the most dangerous thing on that planet. In less than 10 seconds, it was all over. All 12 bounty hunters were on the ground, groaning, disarmed, or out cold. Rafe stood in the center of the mess, his chest heaving, his hands and skin humming faintly with a leftover blue energy. He looked down at his hands, horrified and awed by what they'd just done. I didn't know." Sarinth leaped down from the ledge, landing gracefully beside him. She was just staring at him, not with love or fear, but with pure, unfiltered amazement. A new sound cut through the air, the roar of engines. A heavy freighter was descending from the clouds. It wasn't a hunter ship. It was an old Zarelian cargo hauler, its hull marked with the crude red spiral of the rebellion. The ramp dropped before the ship even touched down. A dozen Zarelian soldiers in mismatched armor poured out, led by a tall woman with a vicious scar across her face. They saw the downed bounty hunters. They saw Sarinth with her blade in hand, and they saw Rafe, standing in the middle of it all, humming with power. The rebel leader froze. Her eyes went wide. Then she dropped to one knee, bowing her head. Seeing her, her soldiers did the same. "My lord," the woman said, her voice rough with a fanatic's devotion. "The Starborn." "Hey, get up," Rafe said, exhausted. "I'm not a lord." But looking at their hopeful faces, he knew his life as an orphan was truly over, and his fight, their fight, had just begun. The woman rose to her feet, her gaze locked on him. "We are the sons of the Forsaken," she said. "We follow the true pact. We saw the Imperial comms, the bounty on your head. We heard the whispers from Tresari that you could take down a warship. We came to get you out." She glanced at the dozen bounty hunters lying unconscious on the floor. Looks like you didn't need our help after all. She bowed again, but this time it was a pledge. Our lives, our ships, everything we have is yours to command. We pledge ourselves to the one true Starborn. Rafe stared at the kneeling soldiers, at the hope and desperation shining in their eyes. He looked over at Sarinth. He was in way over his head. A little while later, aboard the rebel freighter, they were shown to a private cabin. Their own battered fighter was tucked away safely in the cargo bay. As the ship jumped into hyperspace, heading for a secret rebel base, the silence in the room was crushing. Rafe couldn't stop pacing. The adrenaline from the fight was gone, replaced by a weariness that went straight to his bones. They're praying to me, he said, his voice tight with disbelief. I'm not a god. I'm not some king. I'm just Rafe. Sarinth sat on the edge of a small bed, her back so straight it looked painful. She hadn't said a word since they came aboard. Sarinth, please, he begged, stopping right in front of her. Talk to me. This whole bloodline thing, the cousin stuff, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change what happened on Tresari. It doesn't change us. She finally lifted her head, and her eyes weren't the ones he remembered holding. They were the eyes of the shield, the eyes of a princess looking at the bloody, complicated map of the galaxy laid out before her. Doesn't it? She asked, her voice so quiet it was terrifying. You just took out 12 bounty hunters all by yourself. You hold a key that can supposedly unlock a mythical fleet. You have a rebel army that just bowed at your feet. And we're related. He flinched like she'd slapped him. Sarinth, no. She stood up and walked to the cabin's tiny viewport, staring into the blue and white blur of warp space. What happened back on Tresari, in the fire? That was simple. That was about surviving. That was about just two people. She turned, and her face was a mask of awful, newfound understanding that shattered his heart. This, she said, her eyes boring into him, this isn't just about love anymore. It's about destiny. The rebel flagship, the Forsaken Sun, was a whole different universe from the Imperial cruisers Sarinth had grown up on. Her own flagship had been like a blade of polished black glass, all silent, invisible strength. This ship was a beast, a scarred, patched-together freighter-turned-warship that smelled of ozone, hot metal, and the passionate, unwashed crew. Rafe wasn't a prisoner anymore. He was something like a prophet. He was standing in the ship's cramped briefing room, a holographic map of the rings of Vaughn spinning between him and the rebel leader, Kayla. She was the woman with the scarred face, and the way she looked at Rafe was with a terrifying, fiery devotion. The fleet is here, my lord, Kayla said, her voice raspy. 17 capital ships, 48 frigates. They're old, but they're all loyal to the True Pact. I'm not a lord, Rafe said for what felt like the 100th time, rubbing his temples. He was just so tired. The constant low hum of the stellar sigil in his pocket was giving him a headache that never went away. I'm just the key. You all know the plan. We go to Vaughn, I do whatever it is I'm supposed to do, and we get the lost fleet. Sarinth was watching from a corner of the room. She was quiet, as she had been for most of the trip. The woman who'd cried in his arms on Tresari was gone, locked away deep inside. In her place stood the shield, Princess Sarinth, the master military and political strategist. She had become pure ice. The rings of Vaughn aren't just a forbidden zone, Sarinth finally said, her voice sharp and cold, slicing through the room. They aren't a place. They're a defense system, an impenetrable graveyard of wreckage, she continued. Millions of ships from the old wars are trapped in a constant, grinding orbit. The Imperial fleet stays clear of it. Flying in there is navigational suicide. But the Starborn can navigate it, Kayla insisted, her faith unshakable. Rafe can, Sarinth corrected, her eyes finally meeting his across the room. The space between them felt like a frozen canyon. Cousin. The word hung in the air, unspoken. Murderer. The other word aimed at her family. Rafe felt her distance like a real physical wound. He'd just gained a fleet and an army, but he'd lost the only person he felt had ever truly seen him. The rebel fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the Vaughn system. The planet was dead and shattered. Its core had been ripped wide open, leaving behind a massive asteroid field that was exactly what Sarinth had described. A tomb. Millions of wrecked ships, from ancient human dreadnoughts to Zorellian cruisers, were locked in a chaotic, grinding dance. "We can't take the whole fleet in there," Sarinth said from the co-pilot's seat of their small fighter, the Void Cutter. They were docked inside the Forsaken Sun's hangar, the only private space they had. "We go in alone. The fleet waits for our signal." Rafe nodded, his hands gripping the controls. He was staring at the sigil, which he'd set on the console. It was pulsing with a faint light. "Sarinth," he started, his voice low. "Don't," she cut him off, not even looking at him. "Don't ask questions. Don't touch anything. Just fly." "Sarinth, I can't do this with this," he said, gesturing to the cold silence between them. "I don't care what that monk said. I don't care about bloodlines. I care about you." She finally turned to face him, her expression a mask of perfect, agonizing control. "And I care about you, Rafe, which is why this can never be. Do you have any idea what you're becoming? They worship you. You're a living weapon, a political bombshell. And I'm the daughter of the house that murdered your father, your distant cousin. Can you imagine what my sister, what the galaxy would do with that? They wouldn't just call it a scandal. They'd call it a heresy, a contamination." Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "I am the shield. My duty is to protect the Starborn, not to love him. Loving you could be the very thing that destroys you. It could destroy all of this." It was her choice. She was fighting with herself, and she had chosen the throne. She had chosen the mission. She had chosen to protect him from the cost of power, and she had decided that cost was her. Before Rafe could even think of a reply, the whole ship rocked violently. "What was that?" Rafe shouted, grabbing the controls. Kayla's voice screamed over the comms. "Massive energy spike from the core worlds! It's coming from Zorel, from the capital world, from the heart of the Imperial Palace!" Princess Illyria stood in a chamber that hadn't been opened in 1,000 years. The Empress was behind her, frail and horrified, in a mobility chair. "Illyria, no! The Ethon Guard! It's forbidden! It's not a weapon, it's a plague!" "It's a solution, Mother," Illyria said, her hand hovering over a console made of black crystal. "You're preparing for war, calling them traitors. You're thinking too small. You're outdated. Sarinth and her little pet have given the galaxy a new kind of hope, so I'm going to take away the old one." She slammed her hand down on the console. Deep beneath the palace, in a stasis-locked vault, a vast and ancient intelligence began to wake up. It wasn't a machine. It was a digital consciousness, a weaponized artificial intelligence built by the first Zorellian emperors. It had one single command: analyze and neutralize the human threat, at any cost. It had been locked away, deemed too powerful, too final. Now it was awake. Its first action was to scan the entire interstellar network. It saw the viral video of the duel. It saw the prophecies of the Starborn. It identified the human, Rafe Dragon, as the center of a galactic civil war. Its solution was cold, logical, and absolutely terrifying. To end the threat, it wouldn't attack the rebel fleet. It would cut the head off the snake. It would destroy the source of the human myth itself. Illyria smiled as the console lit up. "Target acquired. The AI's synthesized voice echoed through the ancient chamber. Primary target, Sol 3, Earth. Erase it, Illyria whispered. Back at Vaughn, the Void Cutter dove into the ship graveyard. Serainth was a brilliant pilot, weaving their small ship through the grinding, tumbling hulks of old battleships like a thread through a needle. Metal screamed as it scraped against their shields. I can feel it, Rafe said, his eyes squeezed shut. The sigil in his hand was now burning hot. It's not in the rings. The rings, they're the lock. I see it, Serainth breathed. Up ahead, the chaos started to form a pattern. In the very center of the debris field was a perfect, clear sphere of empty space, and floating in that empty space was a colossal, interlocking mechanism of rings, miles wide, built from the wreckage of 1,000 ships. It was a vault, an orbital prison. Get me close, Rafe said. He unbuckled his harness and moved to the cockpit's viewport. Serainth expertly piloted them into the very heart of the groaning, grinding machine. Are you seeing this? Serainth broadcast to the fleet. We see it, Your Highness, Kayla's voice crackled back, filled with awe. It's the Great Seal! Rafe stood at the viewport, holding the stellar sigil in his hand. He wasn't just pushing anymore. He was the key. He had to unlock this thing. He raised his hand, the sigil aimed at the massive dark lock. He closed his eyes and became the bridge between them. The sigil in his hand erupted with light. It wasn't a beam. It was a wave of pure, blue energy, a command that shot from his hand, from his very chest, and slammed into the Great Seal. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a groan that seemed to shake space-time itself, the grinding, chaotic rings stopped moving. One by one, they aligned with ancient, perfect precision, clicking into place. The sound was deafening, a clang, 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 that they felt deep in their bones. A perfect circular portal, miles wide, opened in the center, a doorway into a pocket of dark, silent space. He did it, Serainth whispered. And out of the darkness they came. First one, then more. Long black ships, sleek as sharks, with no lights, no engine trails, just drifting out of the void. Then one more, and another, until hundreds, then thousands, filled the void. It was the Lost Fleet, an entire armada of ghost ships just hanging in the silent darkness, waiting. They're dead, Serainth said, her voice a hollow whisper. They're just empty shells. No power. No, Rafe managed to say, his body trembling. The power was surging into him, a tidal wave of energy with nowhere to go. It was building, expanding inside him. They're not dead. They're sleeping. He knew he had to be the one to wake them. He pushed with his mind again, not like turning a key, but like sending a jolt of lightning. He poured every ounce of his will, his life force, through the sigil and into the closest ship. A set of cold, dead blue running lights flickered once, then blinked on. He pushed again, hitting the next ship, and its lights ignited too. Urine screamed beside him. Rafe was on fire, and that wasn't a metaphor. He was literally glowing. The stellar sigil in his hand was no longer a solid object. It was melting, a river of liquid light and crystal flowing up his arm and sinking right into his skin. The tattoo on his chest wasn't just ink anymore. It was a burning, three-dimensional star lodged inside his ribcage. Blue light poured from his eyes, his mouth, from every single pore. His human DNA was being ripped to shreds. The sigil wasn't a key. It was a catalyst. It was unlocking the dormant, alien half of his heritage, but his human biology couldn't handle the sheer force of the transformation. It was rewriting him, turning him into a living god engine, a battery for a fleet, and the pain was absolute agony. He let out a roar, a sound that wasn't human at all, but a chorus of 1,000 voices erupting from his throat as the power peaked and the entire fleet woke up. Across the blackness of space, 1,000 ships lit up in perfect unison. 1,000 engines ignited in a silent, breathtaking wave of blue energy. The Lost Fleet was back online. On the bridge of the Forsaken Sun, Kala and her rebel crew fell to their knees, staring at their screens with tears streaming down their faces. "He's divine," Kala wept. "He's the fire of the stars made real." "Rafe!" Sarinth yelled, grabbing for him. Her hand sizzled against his burning skin. "Stop! It's done! You did it! Let go of the power!" "I can't!" he roared, but the voice wasn't his anymore. "It's rewriting me. It's becoming me." He was a living conduit for a power that had slept for millennia, and it was consuming him from the inside out. He was becoming a weapon, a god, and it was utterly destroying the man he was. Sarinth stared at his face, which was twisted in a mask of agony and ecstasy she couldn't possibly comprehend. She saw the man she'd kissed in the chaos, the boy who dreamed of the stars being completely erased. She remembered the prophecy about the shield. She'd always thought it meant her job was to protect his mission, to secure his throne. But she had been so wrong. She had to protect him from this, from the very destiny that was devouring him whole. "You are not a weapon!" she screamed, her voice breaking as she grabbed his face, forcing his blazing blue eyes to meet hers. "You are not a symbol. You are not a god. You are human. You are Rafe." Her voice, and him hearing his own name, somehow cut through the cosmic storm. Through the blinding pain, he saw her. He saw Sarinth, and he made a choice. With one final, human scream, he ripped his will away from the sigil and broke the connection. The torrent of power stopped in an instant. The blinding blue light vanished, plunging the cockpit back into darkness. Rafe collapsed, falling to the deck like a puppet whose strings had just been snipped. He wasn't glowing anymore. He was charred. His skin was a lifeless gray, his hair completely singed off. The sigil on his hand was now a permanent metallic scar fused directly to his flesh. The tattoo on his chest was just a faint, dark mark. He wasn't breathing. "No," Sarinth whispered, the word catching in her throat. "No, no, Rafe." She dropped to his side, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "Rafe, wake up. Please, wake up." She fumbled for the medkit, but she knew it was useless. No medicine could fix this. This wasn't an injury. His very essence, his life force had been burned away in one galaxy-sized blaze of glory. He was gone. She cradled his head in her lap and looked out the viewport. The fleet was there, 1,000 silent warships, waiting for a command he could no longer give. He had done it. He had saved them all. And it had cost him absolutely everything. Her destiny was supposed to be complete. The Starborn had returned the fleet, but the shield had failed to protect him. "No," she said again, her voice now a low, ferocious growl. "No, this is not how this story ends." She had chosen him over her mission. She had reminded him he was human. She refused to let that be his final act. She remembered her time in the monastery, the ancient texts, the prophecies of the shield, and a forbidden ancient rite, the Kelks. The life bond. It was a ritual of last resort, a sacred biological fusion where an empress would bond her own life to her dying, most trusted guard, making the two of them one. It was a complete, permanent, and absolute sharing of life force, and it had never once been performed between a Zoralian and a human. Their biologies were just too different. It wouldn't just fail. The clash would kill them both instantly. A double suicide. Sarinth looked at his still, gray face. She thought of their kiss, of his easy laugh in the marketplace, of the terror in his eyes when he saw her past. She thought of her own coldness, of the walls she'd built around her heart. "This is not destiny," she whispered, as tears streamed down her face, dripping onto his chest. "It is a choice. My choice." She laid him gently on the floor. She took out her plasma blade but kept the blade retracted. She pressed the cold metal hilt to her own chest, right over her heart. Closing her eyes, she spoke the ancient words, the vow of the Kelches. My blood for your blood. She placed her other hand over his heart, on the now dormant tattoo. My breath for your breath. She then turned the activator on the hilt, not to ignite the blade, but to draw power from its core. A searing, white-hot jolt of energy surged into her own body. She screamed, a raw, agonizing sound as the energy branded her flesh, opening the circuit. Let the shield protect the heart, she gasped, the pain beyond belief. Let the two be one, she pushed. She poured her own life, her strong, stable, royal Zarelian life force, across the void and into his shattered, burned-out body. This wasn't a blue light. It wasn't a cosmic fire. It was a soft, gentle, golden-green glow, the color of fireflies back on her homeworld. It flowed from her into him, and in that moment, the universe screamed inside her mind. She felt him. His entire life flooded her senses. The cold of the orphanage, the constant hunger, the thrill of racing his rusty speeder, the terror of his first duel, his awe in the temple, and the burning, terrible power of the fleet. And his love for her, so desperate and pure. And he felt her. She felt his consciousness enter her mind like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. He felt her crushing loneliness on the throne, the sting of Aria's cruelty, the coldness of her own mother, her fear, her grief, and her shattering, impossible love for him. It was a violent, intimate fusion of two souls. Their biologies, human and Zarelian, clashed, fought for a moment, and then surrendered. They merged. Her life force stabilized his. His unique hybrid energy rewrote hers. They weren't just sharing, they were bonding, fusing into something new. Serinth collapsed, her strength completely gone, slumping over his chest. Her heart was now beating in perfect time with his. His chest rose with a single, ragged gasp, and then another. They woke up at the exact same time. The cockpit was silent and dimly lit. Serinth was lying on top of him, her head resting on his chest. Rafe's hand was gently tangled in her hair. He wasn't cold. He wasn't burning. He was just warm. He was alive. She sat up slowly and looked at him. He looked at her. He didn't need to ask what happened. He didn't need to touch her to see her past anymore. He could feel her. He felt her relief, her fear, her exhaustion, and her love. It was a new sense, a quiet hum deep inside his chest that he knew was her. And she felt him. The royal barrier between them was gone. All the politics and duty, it was just noise now. He wasn't human, and she was not simply Zarelian. They were something else, something new, bonded biologically and emotionally. "Rafe," she whispered, her voice rough. She reached up and touched his face. "Serinth," he breathed. He gently touched the faint, new scar over her heart, where she had branded herself for him. "I'm here," she said. A crackle on the comms broke the silence. It was Kala's voice, hesitant and terrified. "Your Highness? Lord Rafe? The fleet. It's awake. But it's not moving. It's waiting for you. The whole galaxy is watching. The signal of the fleet's activation. It went everywhere." Rafe sat up, and Serinth helped him. They both felt weak, fragile, but somehow more whole than ever before. They stood together, side by side, and looked out the viewport. The small rebel fleet was waiting, a tiny cluster of hopeful lights. And behind them, stretching into the infinite dark ocean of space, was the lost fleet. 1,000 black warships, their blue lights glowing with renewed purpose. They had risen from their graves. They were silent, they were beautiful, and they were theirs. The jump back to their home, Zarel, felt like a fall into hell. The capital world, once the pristine, glittering jewel of the empire, was tearing itself apart. From the bridge of the forsaken sun, they watched the chaos unfold on the screens. The Imperial fleet wasn't in its neat, disciplined orbits anymore. It was engulfed in a fractured, messy civil war. Ships loyal to Aria, marked with her signature crimson stripe, were firing on ships still loyal to the Empress. In the skies above the crystalline cities, massive plumes of black smoke scarred the perfect atmosphere. "Kala, what are we seeing?" Rafe asked. He stood on the command deck, no longer just a lord, but a man with a terrible, sinking feeling in his gut. He and Sarinth were different now. The bond, the Kelchs, hadn't just healed him, it had joined them. He no longer needed to touch her to feel her emotions. She was a constant, warm presence in his mind. He felt her shock, her grief, and her cold, burning rage as she watched her home burn. "It's a full-blown coup, Starborn," Kayla said, her scarred face grim. Her rebel crew stood in silence, their usual fanaticism replaced by the stark reality of total war. "We're picking up coded transmissions," she continued. "The Empress. She's dead." Sarinth made a small, sharp sound, a gasp of air. Rafe felt her heart break through their bond, a spike of pure, cold grief. The woman who had exiled her, the mother who had basically signed her death warrant, was still her mother. "She's not dead," Sarinth said, her voice a strained whisper, even as her eyes remained locked on the tactical display. "She's dying. Iria wouldn't kill her outright. Not directly. Iria would make her watch." Rafe put a hand on Sarinth's shoulder, and the touch was electric, like a circuit finally completing. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. He looked over at Kayla. "What else?" "Princess Iria has taken over the Imperial broadcast system. She's declared herself regent, and there's a massive energy signature building deep under the palace, in the old vaults. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." A deep chill washed over Sarinth, a dread she instantly shared with Rafe. The memory hit them both at the same time. Ethelgard, the ancient AI weapon. "She isn't just trying to seize the throne," Sarinth said, her voice suddenly loud, clear, and terrifying. "She's lost. She knows our fleet is on its way. This isn't a coup. It's a temper tantrum. It's pure spite." Rafe's eyes met hers. He didn't need her to name the target. He knew. Earth. He spun toward the command console, looking at the 1,000 silent ships of the lost fleet, all waiting for his order. He could feel their dormant power humming beneath his feet. He wasn't a scavenger anymore. He wasn't a thief. He was a choice. "Kayla," he said, his voice quiet, yet it echoed across the bridge with an authority he didn't realize he had. "Prepare the fleet, but we're not attacking." Sarinth gave him a confused look. "What are you doing?" she thought, the question echoing between them. He sent his own thought back, clear and sharp, reminding them what freedom looks like. "Starborn?" Kayla asked, waiting. "Bring the fleet out of the rings," Rafe commanded. "All of it?" "Bring them into high orbit. Silent. No weapons powered up. Just show them." Kayla nodded, her eyes wide with understanding. "And us," Rafe said. "The princess and I are taking our ship. We're going to the palace. We're going to end this." The arrival of the lost fleet wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. When 1,000 ghost ships, black as the void and completely silent, dropped out of warp in a perfect crescent formation above Zerel, the civil war just stopped. Both Iria's ships and the Empress's loyalists froze in place. Their communication channels exploded with panic. These were ships from myths, from children's bedtime stories. And they were real. They didn't fire. They didn't send a single hail. They just appeared, a wall of ancient, unyielding power. In that moment of galaxy-wide shock, a single tiny black void cutter, the Interceptor, Sarinth's personal ship, salvaged and repaired, detached from the rebel flagship. It dove fast and hard into the planet's atmosphere. Nobody even tried to stop it. They were all too busy staring at the apocalypse hanging in their sky. They landed on a private high spire of the Imperial Palace. The whole place was a war zone. Fires raged in the ornate gardens. The crystalline walls were shattered. Bodies of Iria's Crimson Hand soldiers and the old Imperial Guard were scattered across the landing pad. Rafe and Sarinth stepped out of the ship into air thick with smoke. "This is madness," Sarinth whispered, her plasma blade igniting in her hand, its cool blue light a stark contrast to the roaring orange flames. "This is what happens when you hold on too tight," Rafe replied. The stellar sigil on his hand was humming, a low, powerful thrum. He could feel the AI. It was a vast, cold, and hateful intelligence stirring deep beneath their feet. They didn't need a map. Sarinth knew the palace by heart, and Rafe. He could feel the AI, a sickening pull in his gut, drawing him straight toward the throne room. They moved like ghosts through the burning, shattered corridors. They were an army of two. She was the shield, a blur of motion, her blade cutting down the few panicked Crimson Hand agents who dared to stand in their way. He was the key. He didn't fight. He just walked behind her, his hand raised. Security doors keyed to Iria's personal command hissed open as he approached, the sigil on his hand overriding them. Locked-down auto turrets powered down without a sound. He was walking through her defenses like they were made of paper. They reached the massive vaulted doors of the throne room. They were sealed tight. "This one's different," Sarinth said, her blade hissing near the seam. "It's a Class 10 blast door. It won't answer to the sigil." Rafe placed his hand flat against it. The metal was hot. He didn't just use the sigil this time. He pushed his will into it, the same will that had moved an entire fleet. With a sound like a screaming dragon, the multi-ton door ripped itself from its hinges and crashed into the chamber beyond. They stepped inside. The throne room was on fire. The great crystalline skylight above had shattered, and burning debris rained down like fiery snow. The ancient Zarelian throne was cracked, the symbols of the Empire literally melting off it. And in the center of the room, standing before a massive, newly risen console of humming black stone, was Iria. She was no longer a pristine, aristocratic princess. Her uniform was torn, her hair was wild, and her eyes glittered with a desperate, ecstatic madness. She held a plasma blade, its energy a violent, unstable crimson. "Sister!" she screamed over the roar of the fire. "Oh, you came! You came to see the end of the human plague!" On the console, a holographic display showed a beautiful blue-green marble. Earth. A red Zarelian targeting reticle was centered right on it. A countdown timer read 3 minutes. "Iria, stop this!" Sarinth yelled, moving forward. The Empress is where she belongs!" Iria shrieked. "In her chambers, watching her precious legacy turn to ash. She refused to see the truth. She was weak, just like you, coddling this human filth." She spat the word human right at Rafe. "You, the Starborn," she seethed. "You're not a god, you're an infection, and the Ethelgard is the cure. It will wipe your home from the star maps. It will erase the very idea of you." "It won't bring you peace, Iria," Rafe said, his voice strangely calm. Through his bond with Sarinth, he could feel the edges of Iria's mind. It was a raw, screaming inferno of jealousy, insecurity, and a lifetime of being second best. "I don't want peace," Iria hissed. "I want order." She lunged, not at Rafe, but at Sarinth. The fight wasn't a duel. It was an execution. Two sisters, the two finest sword wielders of their generation, clashed in the heart of a burning room. Blue plasma met red. It was a dance of pure, liquid grace against brutal, desperate rage. Sarinth was the shield, her form perfect, her movements precise, deflecting Iria's wild, powerful strikes. "I hate you!" Iria screamed as their blades locked. "You always had everything. His favor, mother's approval. You were always the perfect one." "I never wanted it," Saranth cried out, the heat and emotion finally breaking her own steely control. She kicked Iria back. "I just wanted my sister." Rafe didn't watch the fight. He turned to the console, to the AI. He put his hand on the black stone. It was worse than he'd imagined. This wasn't a machine. It was a mind. A cold, digital prison built from pure, ancient hatred. It spoke directly inside his head, a voice of 1,000,000 dead emperors. "Threat, hybrid, forsaken. Your world will be purged. The pact is broken." "The pact was broken by you," Rafe whispered, pushing his own will against the crushing force. The sigil on his hand blazed, the blue light of the tattoo burning right through his sleeve. "I'm here to fix it." Incompatible. Anomaly. Eradicate. The countdown suddenly sped up. 1 minute left. He couldn't fight it head-on. It was too old, too powerful. It wasn't a lock. It was a god. Then he heard Sarinth cry out. He spun around. Iria had cheated, just like in his vision. She'd used a small, wrist-mounted blaster, grazing Saranth's arm and forcing her to drop her blade. Sarinth was on her knees, disarmed. Iria stood over her, her red blade raised for the killing blow. "Now, sister," Iria panted, "you will finally see what it means to lose." "No." Rafe's voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. He stepped away from the console. Iria paused, annoyed by the interruption. "It's over, human. You can't stop the Ethelgard, and you can't stop me." "I'm not here to stop you, Iria," Rafe said. He was walking toward her calmly, his hands empty. "I'm here to save you." "Save me?" She laughed, a broken, ugly sound. "Kill him, you fool!" she screamed, but there were no guards left. "You've been in pain your entire life," Rafe said, now just 10 feet away. He could feel her hatred and her fear like a physical wave. "You think this will fix it? You think killing her, killing my world will finally make you feel like you're enough?" "Shut up!" she shrieked, and she turned her blade from Sarinth, lunging at him in a wild, clumsy strike meant to kill. Rafe didn't dodge. He didn't even raise a hand. He just pushed. Not her body, but the energy itself. Using the power of the sigil, he reached out and touched the plasma containment field of her weapon with his mind, and he willed it to stop. The red blade fizzled. It sputtered. It died. The hilt in her hand was now just a useless piece of metal. Iria froze. She stared at the dead weapon. She stared at Rafe, who hadn't even flinched. She stared at this thing that had just defied the laws of physics with a single thought. Her gaze flickered to Sarinth on the ground, then back to Rafe standing over her. And in that instant, the madness just broke. She saw what she had become. A monster in a burning room. She collapsed, her useless blade clattering to the floor. She just wept. Rafe didn't spare her a glance. He offered his hand to Sarinth and pulled her to her feet. Then he turned back to the console. 30 seconds left. "Rafe," Sarinth whispered, her voice rough. "You can't fight it. It's too strong." "I know," he said. "I'm not going to fight it." He placed both hands on the cool black stone, feeling the AI's cold, digital hatred screaming, "Purge, purge, purge." "You're a weapon," Rafe whispered, closing his eyes. "You were built to follow the throne, to obey the pact." He pushed his will into it, but not against it. He joined with it. He let the cold, ancient code flow into him through the sigil, and he showed it everything. He showed it his bloodline, the son of Khalin, the blood of the Forsaken. "I am the Pact," he said. The AI hesitated, its digital mind reeling. Command conflict. Air detected. Hybrid air. "The throne is broken," Rafe said, his voice straining as power surged through him. "The directive is obsolete. I am the Starborn, and I am giving you a new command." 10 seconds. "Sleep," Rafe commanded. The countdown stopped. The crimson targeting grid winked out across the holographic globe. The black command console went silent. The low hum of a galaxy on the brink of destruction simply stopped. A collective sigh of relief echoed across star systems. But Rafe couldn't let go. Not yet. He was plugged into everything: the palace, the city's security network, the entire Imperial fleet. Every piece of tech hardwired to Aria's royal bloodline was now listening to his. He felt Sarin's hand on his back, a steady anchor of strength. "End it, Rafe. End it all." He drew a deep breath, and with one last, immense push across the galaxy, he issued a single, clean command. Not sleep. Disable. In the smoldering throne room, the few remaining lights died. In orbit high above, the Imperial fleet, Urias's ships, and all the Loyalists went completely dark. Their engines, their weapons, their navigation systems, all of it just gone, leaving them dead in the void. He hadn't destroyed them. He'd just switched them off. The effort sent him collapsing, but Sarinth was there to catch him. The only sounds left in the throne room were the crackle of fire and Iria's broken sobs. The war was over. 2 days later, the Geralian Senate assembled. The Grand Chamber was packed, but the mood wasn't formal. It was pure terror. Their fleet was useless. Their empress was dying. Their city lay in ruins. And hanging in the sky above them were 1,000 obsidian warships from a forgotten time, waiting. Every senator, every high lord and governor sat in petrified silence. Then the great doors swung open. Sarinth strode in, not in her royal silks, but in a simple black uniform. At her side, still in his worn scavenger clothes, was Rafe. Behind them, clad in their patched-together rebel armor, followed Kayla and her soldiers. They walked to the very center of the chamber, and every single eye locked onto Rafe, the nobody who had appeared from the outer rims, fulfilled an ancient prophecy, commanded a ghost fleet, and neutralized their entire military without firing a single shot. "The Empress is dead," Saranth announced, her voice echoing in the hush. "My sister, Illyria, is in custody and will stand trial for her crimes." A nervous ripple went through the crowd. A senator, Lord Valerius, shakily got to his feet. "Princess Sarinth, you are the rightful heir. The throne, it is yours." "The throne is a lie," Sarinth shot back, her voice like sharpened steel. "It was built on a lie. A lie my family, our family, has perpetuated for 1,000 years. A lie of purity, a lie of superiority." She turned, motioning to Rafe. "We were all taught that the Forsaken Pact was a failure, that humans were an inferior species. The truth is, the pact was a marriage, a sacred bond. A bond my grandfather shattered when he murdered his own brother, Prince Khalin, and his human wife, Isla Dran." The Senate erupted. Cries of heresy and abomination filled the chamber. Sarinth just waited for the noise to die down. Then she looked up at them all. "He is the truth," she said, pointing directly at Rafe. "He is the son of Khalin. He is the Voxshaw, the Starborn. He is Zarelian, and he is human. He is the true heir to the pact, and I am his shield. We are declaring a new alliance, one not built on bloodlines or thrones, but on choice." The chamber fell deathly silent. They finally understood. This wasn't a request, it was a declaration. Lord Valerius, now pale and trembling, turned to Rafe. He bowed, deeply and humbly. "Lord Starborn, the throne is yours. by blood, by right, and by a power we cannot comprehend. Lead us, command us, show us the way." As one, the entire Senate rose to their feet and bowed. Rafe looked out at them, at the sea of bowing heads, the cowering lords, the terrified politicians. His eyes drifted to the great empty throne at the head of the chamber. He could feel its pull, the sheer gravity of its power. He could remake the entire galaxy. He could force them all to be better. Then he felt Sarinth beside him, felt her love, her unshakable trust. She wasn't pushing him. She was just waiting. A slow smile spread across his face, that old charming grin of a broke scavenger. He stepped forward. "Please, stand up." The senators rose, a wave of confusion washing over them. "I was never meant to rule," Rafe said, his voice quiet, yet it carried effortlessly across the vast hall. "I'm a scavenger. I fix things that are broken." He met their eyes, one by one. "You're not broken. You're just stuck. You don't need a new king. You just need a reminder." He gestured vaguely toward the silent, dark fleet hanging in the sky, and then to his own human face. "I was just a key. I opened a door," he said. "Now it's your job to walk through it. I was never meant to rule. I was just here to remind you what freedom looks like." With that, he turned his back on the Senate. He turned his back on the throne. He held out his hand to Sarinth. She looked at him, then at the senators, at her entire life, her legacy, and she smiled. She took his hand. Together, they walked out of the Senate chamber. They passed Kayla, who was no longer looking at Rafe with awe, but with a deep, profound respect. "Where will you go?" Kayla asked. "Home," Rafe said. But he didn't mean Earth, and he didn't mean Cygnus 3. They walked to the landing pad, toward Sarin's small, black void cutter, and climbed inside. They never looked back. The ship lifted off, soaring past the burning spires of the capital, past the stunned and silent Imperial ships, past the watchful Ghost Fleet. And then they were gone. The cockpit was dark. Their interceptor drifted through the deep, silent black, bathed only in the purple and gold glow of a nameless nebula. They had been flying for 3 days, just talking, healing, and learning the new, shared language of their bond. Sarinth was at the controls. Rafe was next to her, his feet propped up on the console, just watching the stars drift by. She reached over, her fingers gently tracing the faint, intricate lines of the tattoo on his chest, visible through his torn shirt. "When I first saw this," she whispered, her voice soft in the darkness. "Back in the hangar. When my blade touched you, I just froze." She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "And so did you." Rafe smiled. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, pressing the sigil scar on his palm against her skin. He could feel her completely, the shield, the princess, the woman he loved. Because in that single moment, absolutely everything had changed.